Launch your phones.
Yep.
Good morning, everybody. It is Tuesday, March 22nd, 2022. This is a special meeting of the Commissioners of the City of Rehoboth Beach, live and in person in the City Hall Commissioners Room, Rehoboth Beach. I'd like to call this meeting to order at exactly 9:01 a.m. If you would join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And we'll start off with roll call. Commissioner Tony Sharp.
Here.
Commissioner Jay Legree.
Here.
Commissioner Ed Shranowski. Commissioner Susan Gay.
Here.
Commissioner Patrick Gossett.
Here.
Commissioner Tim Bennett.
Here.
And Mayor Stan Mills. We have 6 of 7 commissioners. We're able to formally conduct business because we do have a quorum today. We'd like to thank everybody who's here in person. We have a few members of the community in person. I'd also like to thank all those that are watching by live stream or recording. Appreciate you being here. And also like to remind everybody that support documents, when they are available, are embedded into the agenda and are available on our online city portal, as is today's hybrid tree ordinance version that we will be talking about. With that, we'll go to the purpose of the, there's no correspondence identified, correct? No, since last time. And the purpose of this special meeting is to essentially continue discussion of possible revisions to the entirety of the Chapter 253 Tree Code. We have a particular itinerary we've been following, and we're going to continue in place today. Susan Gay, Commissioner Gay, has been leading this charge. She's doing a terrific job, and I want to compliment her because this involves hours and hours and hours of work, and also it's very complicated.
Yeah.
I'd like to explain something, that the version that's embedded in the agenda today has some red line notations in it for recommended changes, deletions, additions. Want to explain that this version that we're looking at, and Susan, you can reiterate if you like, this hybrid version that we're looking at is a combination of what Susan has deemed important for us to take a look at and debate and discuss, and it stems from the current code, also the recommendations for code changes from the Law Oversight Committee, and also recommended changes from the Planning Commission. So we've got a lot on our plate, and with that, I'm going to hand it over to Commissioner Gay.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. I appreciate that. Just a couple of introductory comments since it's been 1 month to the day since we had our last discussion. But the tree ordinance meeting started on February 1st, and at the first meeting, in addition to talking about the overall goals for the CDP revision, I showed a comparison of code changes between the current code and the Law Oversight version, the Planning Commission version, and how they ultimately made their way into the hybrid draft. So we spent the first meeting mostly talking about that. And the second meeting, we did Article 1, which is the code about trees on city property. It's actually the shortest section of the code. So we got through that one, and that was the shortest meeting. We got through that in like an hour and a half. And that was very satisfying. But then at the last meeting, which was the third one on February 22nd, we began what is currently Article 2, which is the tree regulations for trees on private property. And we did not get all the way through that. We got hopefully about halfway through it, and I hope to complete it today. I'll talk about that, where we are in a minute. But at that meeting, in addition to talking about current Article 2, I presented a reorganization for the code as a whole. And essentially, it's going to be that Article 1, a new Article 1 will be done that will include all definitions, all general provisions, because that's the way a lot of our other code is done. It just had not been done here. And then Article 2 will become that short version of the trees on city property. Article 3 becomes the private property that we're talking about now, which is really the meat of the code. And a separate section, Article 4, will be for appeals and enforcement and that kind of language. So I'm hoping today that we will finish this new Article 3. And there's one correction I need to make right off the bat, is the draft that I put in, I neglected to send it to Ann as a PDF, so in the conversion, the line numbers changed. And I had at the top of it that we're starting at line 341. We're actually not, it's line 282, but I have marked it where it says begin here at March 22nd meeting. So our challenge today is to finish this section, and in doing that, we got to cover 300 lines. So since we're starting at 282, that suggests to me we didn't do 300 lines last time. Let's hope we can do 300 lines this time. So we've got a ways to go. But at the same time, some of the language is in the current code, some of the language doesn't change, some of it's not controversial. So I'm hoping to, basically go through each section and talk about the changes we do need to make while not necessarily reading every line of it. So with that, do you want me to go ahead and start?
Yes.
Okay. So section 253.23, maintenance of trees, starts out with, and this is in the current code, a general provision just saying property owners should maintain their lots so that the trees are healthy and neat and orderly. There's no sort of enforcement there. It's just a statement that trees should be trimmed to remove disease or dying portions. But you will notice that there, on number 2 is where you have the statement about not allowing topping or hat racking. That is expressly prohibited because that's a danger to the life of the tree. So I believe that is in the current code. I think topping might be, maybe hat racking was added. But at any rate, that's in the current code. Then number 3 gets down to the city's inspection for trees planted with an approved tree plan. And I have a note over on the side that I believe came from a discussion with Liz, something she brought up that we should talk about. The first one is that the property owner shall submit to an on-site inspection of each planted or preserved tree 12 months after the approval of the plan or the permit, which again, I think is also in the current code, isn't it, Liz? Yeah. And that's for newly planted, and I think the purpose of it is just to make sure that they have survived that critical first year, right?
How about
Yeah, you probably should,
Either sit up, probably
Either
sit
sit
up
or
here would
stand,
be
one of you.
easiest, and
Yeah.
we can get you on camera and get your voice at the same time.
Right. I would say that the 12-month inspection it functions more to see if they actually planted the tree,
Okay.
with the exception of new construction, because that's kind of a built-in as part of the final, so they don't
Right.
get their CO unless the tree is there.
Right, okay. But I had a note over on the side that, and I now do not totally understand what it means, need provision for handling new construction plans and inspections as well as inspections for re-landscaping. Did you think that there should be a difference between those two? I think you expressed to me at one point.
Well, right now, there is, so new construction, it says in the current code that I'm supposed to go out 2 years after their final to confirm everything is alive and planted. And then every year thereafter, which is, it's an impossible task.
Right.
Because basically I would end up inspecting every house every year eventually.
Yeah. So then, are you saying it should just be 12 months no matter what the circumstances are, rather than having two different?
Well, I can tell you what I do now for the new construction. So if the 2-year inspection, everything looks fine, trees are happy, everything is planted, I close them out.
Okay.
If there are issues that they need to fix, even if they fix the issues right away or a tree looks kind of sickly or not taken care of, they go in a re-inspection. So unfortunately, I just physically can't inspect every house every year. So that's what I currently do.
But you do it at the 2-year mark for new construction.
That's what it says.
But you do it at the 12-month mark for everything else?
Ideally, yes.
COVID
COVID
But
messes with
is that the way you want it to be? 12 months for re-landscaping and 24 months for new construction?
That's up to you guys. I mean, the real issue there is we have nothing to, when I go out and do these 12-month inspections for Mrs. Smith, who removed 3 trees and had to plant 1, 50% of them aren't planted,
Aren't planted? Yeah. But so that.
if not
okay.
more. Just give her, but it's somewhere around that, which then creates this really labor-intensive, long process
Right.
of issuing them a notice of violation, well, finding out why it's not there first, issuing a notice of violation, which gives them 30 to 60 days, then redoing an entire planting plan that, remember, they've only paid $50 for all of this to begin with, and now we have several hours worth of work involved. Now, for some people, they plant,
They
plant
planted
the
in
tree
front.
right away. I go out, it's in the front yard, it's alive, I check it off, I, close out the system, we're good.
Right.
But
But that's for re-landscaping plans. In other words, because if it's new construction, they've planted them because they don't get their CO otherwise.
yes, so it's actually easier with the new construction.
Um,
I mean, we might have some that are failing, but generally if people invest money, I mean, I still might have one every now and then where, say, the tree is dying and I have to send them a notice of violation, but most of the time that's not true for the new houses.
But you still want to check them at 2 years to make sure they're live. So
They
there sort of is
exist.
a reason for 12 months versus 24 months.
To make sure that the trees are still there and that
Right.
the other preserved trees are still there too.
Okay. Do we have comments? or
There,
questions?
later in the code, I think there are additional references to inspection timeframes
In the existing or proposed?
Both.
proposed.
Proposed? I don't know.
Well, both.
So we'll keep that in mind
Okay.
when we go forward.
Anybody have anything else on, I mean, just, it sounds like we want to have 12 months for a plan that is not new construction. I have to figure out the wording, and 24 months for new construction, right?
Yeah, I mean, it could be less. So one of the good things about the 12 months now with the 3-inch tree,
Yeah.
it does give, say if you're removing some dead trees or you had a significant cost to remove them and now you have a significant cost to replant, it gives you both time to like look at your yard and see what you want to do so you're not making any rash decisions on species and placement and stuff, but also it gives you time like financially to re-budget. If it's going to be another 5,000, you just spent 3,500, now it's going to be another 5,000, it spreads that out from a year. So the 12 months is nice, but also keeping in mind that we're reducing that tree size, so that number will be smaller.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I am glad to hear that there's no requirement to keep checking over the years, right? It's only one time for each type. New landscaping, 12 months, new construction, 24 months, and then if all is good, then that's it. You don't check again, right?
The code says I should.
I know, but I'm saying I don't know.
Practically.
I'll have to see if that's still in here later on, because I don't.
Yeah,
know.
practically it's
Practically
just
it doesn't.
impossible.
Right. Okay.
Commissioner, let me address members of the public that are here. We welcome your comments. Normally, we try to get to certain points in the code so that we can get you up several times. But we've got so few here. If you have something that you'd like to say and can't wait, then please raise your hand and we'll gladly listen to your comments. Susan, go ahead.
Yeah, and the only other thing is that 3B does address that if it's determined on this on-site inspection that the tree is not in compliance with revisions of the code, that's when Liz gives notice, and the homeowner has to correct the deficiency within 60 days or a longer period as specified. Okay, so that's it on maintenance. Any other? Okay, so the next one is the process for submittal of tree plans with applications for a building or demolition permit, a subdivision or site plan approval, or a tree removal permit. And the first section in A lists the circumstances under which a tree plan is needed. And it's for any tree removal permit, for a demolition permit, for a building permit, where there's land disturbance activity. And that's actually something we talked about last week with maybe clarifying the level of land disturbance activity. We may want to do that. A subdivision or a site plan review. And I guess one question I have for Liz is the second part of this, and I think it's probably in the code now, where it says review of the tree plan will proceed in the same manner by the same city officials responsible for reviewing and approving the application for the building permit, subdivision, or site plan review, is, what do you mean by that? I mean, because it implies that the building inspector is looking at the tree plan, which I get, I mean, I understand that the tree plan would be part of site plan review, for example, but otherwise, is that right? That it's saying that it'll be reviewed in the same manner by the same city officials?
I mean, keep in mind, this was done way before I started here.
Yeah.
I believe at that time it was done by the chief building official.
Okay,
But how I take it, reading it now, is that we proceed in the same manner in which it's submitted to the front desk at building and licensing. It's processed by the administrative staff. It's distributed to the like me or the chief building official or the assistant building official or whoever, permit technician. And it goes in line with all the other permits and proceeds just in the same exact manner in terms of time frame and evaluation and stuff like that. And then also it gets bundled with, so if it's related to a building permit, it gets bundled, the tree permit gets bundled with the building permit. So you can't have one
Okay.
before you have the other.
I see, okay. So then it is okay to leave it this way.
Unless we want to clarify it, but that's how I take it currently, what it means is,
Okay,
What, why do we need that? I mean, this is just an internal, just recognize what you do
we've had
internally?
We've had a lot of pushback over people wanting tree permits before building permits and vice versa. So, like, still, after me being here for 6 years and us doing it that way, still get it pretty much every week. So,
really, okay.
I mean, yeah. Yeah, unfortunately.
So saying it will proceed in the same manner is,
That's what I point them to and just say this
Right.
is our process, because
Okay.
there's other portions of the code now that when we review the tree and the building plans, that's the city's opportunity to request changes. So if they're not processed concurrently, how are we supposed to review and ask for any changes and amendments if
Right.
they've already been issued one or the other?
right, yeah, exactly.
You know?
Right.
And
right.
honestly, quite often the building permit applications, I mean, the building official would have to speak to that, but oftentimes they require changes or modifications to the footprint or the floor plan or whatever it may be.
So is that clear? You think that it achieves the intention?
To maintain.
It sounds like it does from Liz's point of view.
It's working so far.
Okay.
I would say that if you wanted to change something, this would be the spot for it, though, if we don't agree with that process or we want to make it clearer.
Well, I mean, if that's the process you're using and it's working, right?
I think at the time this was written, the city arborist was also the code inspector, wore double hats, so that
Couple
may
before
be
me.
why this was written in such a manner. But if it's understandable that it's all in the same process, if you say the same bundle of applications, I think that would be appropriate to continue this way.
Okay,
I have a question
yeah.
on the point 1A1, and Glenn, you may be, and both of you.
Give a line number if you would.
I'm sorry, just 309 to 317, just a list of applications. We don't mention partitioning, subdivision or merger of land, site plan reviews, et cetera. So if a partitioning happens, is it necessary to also make these considerations?
Yeah, I mean, yes, it is. I think that the subdivision code actually calls a partition a subdivision. It's a form of a subdivision. So it's not a major or a minor, it's a partition. But I wouldn't think it's too duplicative to put partition in here,
Okay,
just to
yeah.
make it for
Because it's a
clarity.
familiar term that people use.
Right.
So I that kind of threw out the document if we could add that, so.
So should D then be partitioning, subdivision, or merger of land?
Sure,
Okay,
I think so.
okay, do that. Okay. And then B just lists and I think this is the same as what's in there now, but I have one slight tweak, that tree plans need to contain, the dimensions of the property, the location, type, and DBH of all existing trees of 2 inches DBH or greater, because now we're requiring 2, not 3 inch. and location of structures, location of power lines. Then number 5, which is line 338, where it says location, height, DBH of all trees proposed. I think that line, instead of DBH, should be caliper, because when the trees are bought, they're caliper, not DBH. So that's a correction there. And then general notes about mulching requirements, fertilization, and planting details. So that just basically is a list of all the elements of the application.
Liz, you're fine with changing from DBH to caliper, that,
Yes, Commissioner Day is correct. It should be caliper.
A question on 6, is that enough detail, if you will, when you talk about general notes, including mulching requirements, fertilization, planting details, and such other information? Is that just kind of a catch-all, or are the applicants understand what that means? Or are there minimum requirements or something?
I'm not even sure if we have something like that in the code now, but most of the time people don't hear, most of the plans don't have that information on them. In my former
don't
job, when we did big, where they were required to have a L1 and L2, like forestry plans, landscape plans, that was required, what they were gonna do for soil testing, fertilization, mulching, airspace, any of that stuff. We've never really required it here.
Oh, of number 6, you don't require that?
Line 341, 342. I'm
Yeah,
just curious.
341, 342.
It's kind of a,
Yeah, it's a catch-all for sure.
Yeah.
If you don't require it, then maybe we shouldn't have it in there.
If it's not, well, that's up to you guys. If we want to require people to do this stuff, then we can add it on there. A lot of times, if they're doing a new house, they'll have at least the planting details. So like it'll show how the stakes go in the ground and how the mulch should be done, like a little diagram. But very, very rarely does it say anything about fertilization. But if it didn't have the planting details in there, I wouldn't tell them to resubmit it with the correct way to apply mulch.
Okay,
so is this information beneficial to you as the arborist, or?
No, it would only be beneficial if we're going to actually require, say, on new construction, them to do things.
Okay.
If it's just, hey, whatever you're planning to do, let us know for information, it's not helpful. Well, it's not necessary, I
so
should
then
say.
should we take it out? Because it's just,
Sounds like.
I would simplify at any.
But what if we were to require it for new construction, so you have a baseline to go forward on?
Yeah, we could require it.
Well, I'm just, for new construction only is what I'm saying. So you've got a baseline to start with or not?
I don't know.
It's just starting to feel intrusive to me, that's all.
Yeah, and it's general, and she's not doing it now.
All right, well, that's fine. That's why I raised the question. I just didn't
Yeah.
understand what the true purpose is. So we can strike it if that's.
Would
what
you like
it's
to
for
say
everybody.
something? We're going to need to have you come to the microphone, state your name, address, and let Ann turn it on first.
I'm Stephanie Smith. I live at 216 Norfolk Street. It's relatively new construction, so I'm an experienced person going through the current. We did have to submit a tree plan that is part of a survey and
Right.
show where existing trees were and their size and their type and the new ones we are going to put in. But I think it is excessive to have us also have to include fertilization details and mulch, because you already have in other sections of the code that you can only have grass or mulching. So these planting details would be like me having to write down what I'm going to do for a fringe tree for the next 2 years. That seems a little excessive. If my tree dies, you all have it covered that you'll be out to check on that.
Thank you, Stephanie.
Yeah, I
Thank
think
you.
so. Okay. All right.
Are you going to take out lines
I was going
341,
to take out number
342?
6. Yeah, I was going to do that. And then C, basically, and the reference is wrong. It should be 25327, I think, because it's changed a couple of times. The city shall designate one or more protected areas where it is essential that for the limited purpose of protecting the roots and trunk of the tree during construction or demolition or other activity. There's a separate section we'll be talking about further up, 27 in fact, about tree protection. So I don't think we should get into the tree protection part now. Just note that is that is there under as part of the creation of the plan, that the city will designate a tree protection zone.
Well, part of my philosophy of this entire exercise is to protect our trees, but also to simplify and allow for some flexibility. I guess I'm questioning here that is the city that's going to designate these areas. Do we really want the city to be responsible for telling me when I'm building a new house or doing remodeling where my boundaries are and how far out, and then my tree dies and I challenge you that you didn't tell me to protect another 2 feet diameter, et cetera. So I'm leaving a question mark there for now.
Well, I can add to that. That's not really how we utilize this section currently, because this is verbatim what
Yeah,
we have.
this is in the current code, right, right.
So the current code, if you're doing more than 500 square feet of improvement, so adding a deck and a pool, for example, you're automatically required to have tree protection. Okay, that's just a baseline. You don't get through the office and get your permit unless you have that in place. This section gives us
What was that again, tree protection?
Tree protection, it's for, the
But
details
that's-
of tree protection are further up in the
the
code.
tree protection
Further,
fence.
further in,
Yeah.
right.
So this section, C, lines 344 through 347, give us the ability to say, okay, well, you're only disturbing 495 feet, but you're going to be ripping up the whole backyard and you have a lot of mature trees back there. Or your pathway, right? So maybe they can only access it through the left side of the house because the right is only, you know, a 3-foot setback because it's an older home. And there's trees in the way. So it gives us extra flexibility to say, hey, we know you don't hit 500, but you still need to protect these.
So from a legal perspective, is that clear? Is this in the right place? Can we not delete this and add something to our tree protection area there or
There's a bunch
something?
been added to
Again,
the
the
tree
whole
protection.
purpose of this exercise for me is to simplify, but also be much more clear than we are now. And it doesn't sound like we are.
Not had any problems, any pushback on this.
But you're
ever.
saying the city is the city is the one that designates
Yeah,
that.
so we get their plan in, and
Yeah.
and you know, one of the building officials might be like, they don't quite hit 500, but they're 499, right? All intent. What's the difference between 499 and 500 in the grand scheme, right? So that's how we utilize it.
I
now.
guess what I'm still having is the trouble that the onus is on the city, or the city's going to dictate the tree protection areas versus putting that challenge on the property owner.
So Liz, if it's more than 500 square feet of disturbance, is it the applicant that is designating the areas? And it's only when you see something come in that says they didn't have to designate an area because it's less than 500 square feet, but we notice a unique situation here, so we're going to
Correct.
impose. So typically, I guess if it's over 500, it's going to be the applicant. So what Liz is saying is, you know, we can put the onus on the applicant, but we only put the onus on the applicant when it's 500 square feet or more of disturbance. They, I guess, when they see a plan come in and they notice something unique about the plan, then this gives them the flexibility to say, we know you didn't hit the 500 square feet, but due to these unique circumstances, we'd like you to protect this area.
And where in the code does it specifically say when you are below the threshold, the legal threshold for establishing tree protection areas, that the city can come in and tell you that you still have to do a tree protection area?
So it seems to me, Mayor, if there is a section of the code, and I'm not familiar with it, is there a section of the code that actually says at 500 square feet, that's when you?
In the current
So
one,
I would think in that same section, you'd want to say, however, the city arborist retains the right to, you know, impose additional requirements for unique circumstances.
So again, if you do that, is this the right place for this? That's what this
Yeah, I mean, I think
whole exercise is.
Yeah, I think the
clean
reason
up.
it's here is just to include it as part of the process of what happens when tree plans come in. In other words, it's not the detail, it's just saying this is one of the steps that's taken during a tree plan exercise. I think that's why it's here, but we can take it out.
Still not sure that
Yeah.
it's appropriate there.
The
that
other
we-
issue we have is, like, we currently have that hard line at 500 now.
Yeah, and we're changing
Whatever
that.
we're doing in this
Yeah.
one, whatever the land disturbance is. I'm not sure how that
I'm
ties
not, I don't
in.
think I don't know how
Well,
that hasn't shook out.
Can we make a note that lines 344 to 347, we will come back to
Yeah,
when we
okay.
get into the tree protection?
Okay, that's a good idea. And I think it's fine if it comes out, but anyway. Number D is about the fee. Now, it's currently $50, and I heard Liz say just a few minutes ago that plans have come back several times, and that $50 barely covers it. The draft it says 100, and I know from our discussions about other applications last week that the standard application fee for any kind of application is $150. So I guess I'm wondering, should we make it $150 because that's standard with all applications, or since those are building permit applications and therefore more complex, should we leave this one at $100 because it at least covers costs more than the $50, but without being too much of an increase? I don't know.
Well, right now, we only collect that $50 for new construction tree plans.
Really?
So,
Okay.
yeah, I'm not, I'm not really sure why. Like, so a regular homeowner comes in and wants to take out a few trees and has to replant. We
Yeah.
don't charge them. When I go and inspect the property and I say, okay, in order to issue the permit, I need a tree planting plan meeting the following requirements and, bullet point them all for essentially one new tree, we don't charge them $50. Additional. We charge
Yeah, the
them,
permit fee.
so we charge
Right,
them.
and that's further down in the code. We
so
have
you-
permit fees.
Just
Yeah.
so everybody's clear on the
Yeah.
fees, person submitting a tree removal permit application, when you come into the front desk, you have to pay $20 to leave your permit
Oh,
with
right,
us.
an
Okay, so
application
it's
fee.
20, everything that comes in there is $20
Right.
right off the bat.
Mhm.
Then if you're approved for tree removal, to pick up that permit, unless the tree is dead, it's 50.
Mhm.
For new construction tree plan review, it's another 50.
Okay,
But we don't charge
for every tree plant.
for every tree planting plan, yeah.
Should we? I mean,
Probably, to be fair.
yeah, I mean, you're reviewing them, right? You're
Yeah,
taking time
well,
to review them.
And then we would have to decide how many times am I going to allow them to change before we charge them again.
What do you do for, don't building plans change?
Yeah, I think they do 3
Oh,
for whatever their
Okay.
review fee is, 150.
it's 150 for the review fee, yeah.
But their permit fees are also much higher.
Right,
So,
yeah,
but like you said, it's, it can take 8 hours to review a new home,
right,
like focused 8 hours. So it's a little different.
yeah, right.
Well, isn't the language here maybe where we should be going, and it's the application of this today that varies from it?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I
tree
think so.
plan review fee, period. Anybody, whether it's new
Absolutely.
construction or
Yeah.
not.
Right.
And so one question is, should we start charging that $20 processing fee for every application?
No, that's,
that
the
ever
$20
comes?
processing fee is just is just for everything. But that's not in any
I
part
didn't
of the
finish.
code. Okay.
I just
Yeah.
said,
Yeah,
should we start charging a $20 processing fee for every application we get for anything, building and licensing,
we do.
outdoor dining and all that stuff? So then, should we be doing that here?
Well, no, but the processing fee is not part of any code. In other words, the fees that we put in on Friday with the outdoor dining, the processing fee is in addition to that. It's a flat $20 to just walk in the door and submit an application. That's not in the code, it's just in the procedures. It's on the city website that there's an application fee.
I guess where I was headed at was, I'm willing to consider codifying that or something that for every application, there's a $20 processing fee. And then additionally, there is an application
Right.
fee,
And that's the way it is
however you
now.
And that's-
title it differently.
I mean, just reading from the website, so as of April 1st, 2009, all permit applications must be accompanied by a $20 processing fee. So,
Where is that in?
And under building and licensing fees on the city website.
yeah.
Is it not, I thought it was codified somewhere in the, not in the tree, but.
I'll look to find that, but I mean, that's what we post right now. And it basically so that people just don't show up and start filing applications, sort of have some skin in the game to to process it.
Can you just roll that into the building fees in general? It feels like we're nickel and diming.
That would be
that.
nice, except you would want to see the stack of permits we have that people haven't picked up because they're still missing information or whatever it may be. So I think the $20 is really to offset that admin cost at the front desk.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's reasonable, and that's a sort of a baseline that applies to everybody.
I mean, it would be much simpler in terms of, I know our front desk staff would thank you in terms of, because then they only have to process one payment versus 2 separate payments.
Right.
But
And I
Yeah.
guess this goes with
Might be
that
a
as
big
well then. Could this tree plan review fee, could that all be rolled into just the building permit as well?
the tree plan review, the $50 for
They're
new
not always
construction
building.
it says, like that comes out as part of Matt's like
Right.
review on his page of fees.
So it has to be separated?
Well, I'm trying to remember what his fee page looks like, but it lists out all the different fees you may have when you're building the new house. I mean, I think, you know, they have quite a few different things on there, but the $50 one is part of that.
10211 does have the $20 processing fee.
Oh, okay.
A permit of any type issued by the building official or the building official's designee under this code shall be subject to a permit processing fee of $20.
We're solving a problem that if we don't have that, they stack up. We're solving a problem that's real, I guess. I'm assuming it's real.
Well, no, I mean, the $20 is, to me, that's sort of a separate thing. That's an application fee for a processing fee for everything. What we're talking about here is what the fee to review a plan. In other words, you come in and submit a tree plan to the city, what is the charge for reviewing that plan? The permit fee, if the plan is approved, the permit fee is a different thing. We'll get to that. That's way up on line 471. But this is just a reviewing, and the analogy would be that for house plans, you come in and submit your application, and you pay $150, right?
Commercial plan review fees, yeah.
And that's for reviewing it. That's the
what's the
administrative
what's the
fee to
residential?
review your building permit.
Right.
And then you pay an additional percentage of the cost of the construction. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Correct.
And the $20 is solving what problem?
It's just a processing fee to walk in the door.
Different from the administrative fee and different from the fee of construction.
Correct.
I'm with Commissioner Bennett.
It just seems like we're nickel and diming. Why not just raise everything $20 then, rather than, it's almost like, I want color copies. Well, that's going to cost you $5. You know, I know it's going to cost something, but to
Commissioner Gossett, would you mind looking into this a little deeper? Maybe meet with Sharon Lynn to get her perspective. She had to step out for another appointment, unfortunately.
So we'll revisit the whole fee thing too.
So we'll
And, you
come,
know, you may want to look at that when we get further up in the code and talking about the permit fee. You may want to talk about it again in conjunction with that.
yeah.
Yeah, okay.
So,
Okay. Now, so that's the end of the section on tree plans. The next section is provisions for tree removal permits. And a couple of things here. In A, it has the provision that no person shall directly or indirectly cut down, substantially alter, destroy, remove, relocate, damage, or authorize any such act involving a protected tree situated on any land without first obtaining a tree removal permit. And then no permit shall be issued to remove any protected tree unless removal is by a licensed tree professional, and if in the judgment of the arborist, professional removal is needed for the protection of the property. Now, we changed the definition of protected tree. Hold on a minute. Protected tree is one of two things. It's any tree necessary to meet the density requirement, or it's an existing tree of 8 inches DBH or more. It used to be 4. That's been changed to 8, that the protected trees are bigger, more valuable trees.
I have that, the current code that I printed out on January 24th says the protected tree is an existing tree of 6 inches caliber or more.
Well, I think that there have been several versions, and it is possible that,
There's 3 different, like, it can be
actually,
6 inches if it's in the backyard, 4 inches if it's in the front, 4 inches
Oh,
if
that's
it's
the current
a-
code though, right?
4 inches if it's a
that's right.
juniper, cedar,
that's
or
ac-
dog.
it's actually 3 inches between the front lot
Yeah.
line and the front,
Yeah.
and 3 inches, okay.
This is much simpler, if
Right.
that's what we're.
And
what
is
we're
8 the
going
right
for.
number for, in your perspective, Liz?
I mean, I think that everybody's gone back and forth quite a bit on
Yep,
that.
we sure have.
8 should give any homeowner ample time to recognize they have a tree growing that they don't want. So,
Right.
like, sometimes by the time it gets 3 inches, you don't even realize what's happened. You know, it's growing behind a shed, and all of a sudden you're like, wait, what's, you know?
Right.
So, 8 inches is pretty sizable.
And you're okay with that?
Yeah, I think that seems
That
reasonable.
means anything smaller than that is not protected and can come out,
Well, unless they don't meet minimum
unless they don't
density.
meet the requirements, right?
Yeah.
Okay, you okay with that? All right. Now, the list of, and it's interesting, the number 2 gives a list of all the ways that tree removals can be permitted. And at every Parks and Shade Tree meeting, I think, Glenn, you read that list. So it's fairly standard is what's there now. However, there are a couple of exceptions and there are a couple of changes. Number 1 has to do with if an application is filed for a building permit and the tree presents reasonable development. So that's one of the reasons for a tree removal permit. That in the current code is actually divided between 2 numbers. One is for a building permit, the other is for reasonable development. And so this number 1 just combines those because it's the same concept into one provision. The other 2 changes are number 7, starting at line 395.
I'm going to come back to number
Okay, yeah,
1.
I just want to do an overview of what these are, and then we can go back and talk about specific ones. Number 7 at 395, it says, "The tree is located where it interferes with the root or crown development of a larger, healthy, protected tree." That's a provision added by the Planning Commission's version. So that is not in the current code, right, Liz? It's not in the current code, but it's
No.
one that, and I know you may have issues with it, but it's one the Planning Commission wanted to add, so it's in this draft. Then the other, number 8, and I'm glad we have this one in there, where it spells out that a tree is determined to be one of the following invasive species, and it lists 6, and there may be more invasive species, but I think when I talk about it with Liz, she thought it would be good to list the major ones we see here, and specifically saying, yes, those can come out. Number 9, I just noticed last night, it's a note to add a provision, but the exact words aren't there. And that is to allow for removal of trees for any reason if the minimum tree density is maintained and the tree is not a protected tree and the tree removed is replaced. So we do want to talk about that.
Susan, while you're on the item number 9, line 401, maybe it's a matter of wordsmithing, but it
Yep.
indicates an instruction
Yes,
there.
I just said that.
Okay,
Yeah.
sorry.
Yeah.
I'd like to go back to item number 1, lines 370 to 377. That's something I'd like to, between now and the next meeting, meet with you, Liz, and Glenn on. Glenn, I'm not sure I can articulate my concerns just because I can't remember, but there have been some Parks and Shade Tree Commission appeals in the last year where property owners have designed their house and gotten their tree protection permits, and they've gotten their building permits, and they've protecting their trees, and then they start the house, and then they go and take down the protected tree, either with or without permission. And there's just something, you and I have talked about before. I don't know if you have the recollection I do. Mine's fuzzy, I'm afraid, but there is a way around protecting trees with the current process, and I'm not sure that this addresses it. Do you remember?
What's happened in the past, Mayor, and I think Liz probably has some recollection as well, is an owner will get issued a building permit and a tree protection plan is submitted during that process. And on the building permit, I think there's some language that says, and you agree to this tree protection plan. And they'll get into the construction, and at some point they'll say, oh yeah, I know I agreed to that, but I want to change something, and I want to remove this tree now, and they come to the Park and Shade Tree Commission, and the Park and Shade Tree Commission sometimes will issue a permit. There's an argument that once they've agreed and signed on to that tree protection plan and that building permit is issued, there shouldn't be an avenue of appeal to the Parks and Shade Tree Commission at that point, because they've agreed to that scenario, and then they're coming later and saying, I know I agreed to it, but, you know, let me file an appeal and, you know, see if I can get that changed. That's happened a few times.
Well, you're missing the one in between step for them to get to Park and Shade. When they come back to me, I have to officially deny it.
Right.
But the way the code is now, the clock starts ticking, 30 days. But that doesn't preclude them from applying again if the 30 days expire. They could do that forever, right? I could deny it. I mean, I have this. I have trees unrelated to new construction that I've denied 3 times in the past 6 years, right? So they just keep trying and nothing changes with the tree and they never appeal it. So what you're thinking is like somebody comes to us in a new house and say their outdoor shower is sitting on top of a 30-inch healthy oak. And I review the plans and I say, unfortunately, we can't approve this as is. You're going to have to relocate the shower or push the pool over 5 feet, which shifts out, whatever it may be. And they say, okay, no problem. We sign off on it. So then they get their building permit quickly, right? Then they come back and they say, hey, we've changed our mind, right? The other thing is if they say, well, we don't want to do that. We want the outdoor shower here because that way it gets the western sun or whatever thing people think of. And I say, unfortunately, then we can't approve your building permit, so you're going to have to go to Park and Shade. And that's a minimum of 30-day wait, right? Because you have a 30-day advertising fee, so it depends on when they land in that appeal process. So that means everybody's losing money, right? The builder's losing money, the owner who's 50% of the time going to rent the place or wants to enjoy it for their summer, whatever it may be, or is paying rent or mortgage on another place and they can't move in. So that's why people do it, because they don't want to wait. More often than not, in the last couple of years, they don't come back to me and ask for the original version. Sometimes they do, but it still is resulting in more trees being saved by...
Said that.
Yeah, I mean, even if they come back, I mean, that's why we have Park and Shade Tree, right? So what can we do if they decide they changed their mind? Can something really be unappealable, like a final decision? I don't know if that sounds fair either. But, you know, essentially using and signing off on things just so they can get their building permit quickly doesn't really serve any purpose either. So, I don't know. I'm torn on it.
But the tree plant's part of the certificate of occupancy, right?
Well, the trees having been planted is part of it.
Conformance to the tree plan,
Conformance, yeah.
yeah. Yeah.
How often is it legitimate that truly you agree that yes, it needs to be changed? Is that frequent?
What do you mean that I agree it needs
They
to
come
change?
back to you and say, hey, we got this, this is changed, I want to do B. And you'll look at it and say, sure enough, you need to do B. How often does that happen?
Not sure I really understand your scenario.
But I think what he's saying, what the commissioner's saying is if, for example, somebody comes in and you say, nope, there's a specimen tree here, you need to move your shower over here. Then they get into construction and find out there's a utility line, right, where you said to put your shower. And they say, we can't put the shower there because the utility line's here. So now I'd like to shift it back and take the tree out. That would be a legitimate reason. Does that happen frequently?
No, maybe once or twice in 6 years. I don't want to say it's never happened, but I can't think of any. If so, it was self-made. They
So some have come back, but not for that reason.
not for a reason that was outside of their control. No.
Okay, I see.
That's
Okay,
the best
I see.
way to put it.
Okay.
Did that answer?
Yeah, so
Well,
I
you
guess
know-
what we're talking about now is subterfuge. We're not talking about
Yes.
legitimate.
But
Reasons.
I don't want to say like people are sneaky about it. A lot of times they tell me, well, we'll sign off on this, but they probably will end up appealing this. Like people aren't trying to be
Right.
necessarily. It's how the code is. I don't know if we want to call it a loophole or that's just the way it can be done.
But you told me before, this is one of the things I thought was very encouraging about this language about reasonable efforts made with alteration of the building design in order to save a tree, that the way you often get compliance on that is that it takes time to go to Parks and Shade Tree, and they don't want you know, that's a waste of time. And so they say, okay, if that's what it takes, because they want to get on with it. I mean, I think that's a
Yeah,
good thing.
if they're not really like,
Yeah.
we don't want any trees here because we want to start fresh and that's what's easiest.
Right.
But
th-
then they
okay.
hear 60 days, 50 days, and they're like, nah, never mind. We'll scooch the shower over. We'll move the pool 4 feet.
And if it results in saving trees, I think that's probably a good thing.
And it does.
You know,
Like I
it's
said-
not a fine, it's a time issue.
Some people do come back around,
Mm-hmm.
but we're less than 50%. I can think of like
Well, I was going to say, I would hope it'd be a lot less than 50%.
a couple in the last year. But yeah,
Yeah.
most of them are just kind of like, well, I guess it's easier to keep it.
Right. Yeah.
Say, I'm mindful of an incident within the last year that they designed their house with an entrance in front of a tree, and the tree is this big, and they agree to keep it, and then in the middle of construction, they go to Parks and Shade and try to remove it. So for me, even if it's one a year, that's a significant tree that's being cut down. And for me, I didn't see any reason for it, but the other thing I'm not convinced of is that we really have the power to cause a designer or a property owner to redesign a house. I don't think we can do it. And I mean, I could name examples, you know, big trees, monster trees that have come down where why couldn't they have just moved something over? And we seem to be powerless to do that.
Well, I think there's a big difference between redesigning a whole home, you know, plans that cost $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 versus moving an outdoor shower or rotating a patio. Those are the type of changes, flipping a house plan. Those are the type of changes we request. And the word reasonable, Glenn could probably tell you that's probably not a great word to have there because what is reasonable?
Right. Yeah. Reasonable.
I know that there's been court, like there's Atlanta, for example, is touted as having a really great tree code, very, very strong. And they've lost court cases on that word.
Right.
That being said, they still have a great tree code. That word just means different things to different people. So moving a park, so say instead of a stack, like a side-by-side parking area, making it go up the side of the house, those are the things we're talking about, and only for significant trees. Right now, if it was like a 5-inch maple, well, they can go right to a nursery and get another 5-inch maple. We're not making people redesign
Right.
homes.
Well, that's why we made the protected 8 inches.
Yeah, we're not making people redesign homes for small trees that can easily be replaced or unhealthy trees. I had one that was an outdoor shower and it showed on the survey like a 40-inch maple. And I said, hey, red flag.
Right.
And I told this to the builder, red flag, but I have to go look at it. And I go and look at it and it's already half dead before they've done any work. So there is a degree of common sense that goes into that as well.
So Commissioner Gay, for lines 370, 377, do you see a need to tweak any of that? Or?
Well, I mean, I saw Glenn sort of shaking his head over the reasonable can be interpreted many ways. Should we
Well,
change that?
I've always had concern over this specific provision, telling a person you have to redesign your plans or move this way or that way to save a tree. And I think there's legitimate reasons for it. However, I've always thought something that goes that far in a tree code, now you're talking about zoning, you're regulating private property and what people can and cannot do on their property. And a provision that goes as far as saying you can't do this with your property because of a tree that is here, that feels like a zoning issue, and it should be in zoning and have public hearings and all those sorts of things associated with it. So this provision, I think, there's only a few people, I don't know how many people are listening, but if we were challenged on this, I think we'd have a hard time winning a case where we told somebody you cannot build the home you want to build because there's a tree in the way. So
Now, does it make a difference? Because what we've done is you can have your pool, but instead of it being 20 feet long and 10 feet wide, it can be the reverse, right? So 20 feet wide and 10 feet long. We've never told people they can't have things that they're allowed to have in that zoning code. Like
You're
it's
just
more
moving them
about
over.
like your front walkway, like the
Right.
mayor was talking about. Instead of curving your front walkway so it goes through the middle of a 35-inch pine, why don't you make it straight so it avoids the tree? Those are the type of changes we request. We don't go back and say, hey, that big southern magnolia sitting smack dab in the middle of your lot, well, you need to make your house in a horseshoe shape around it.
Yeah, I think those distinctions do matter. I mean, I think if you told somebody that wanted to build a 3,500 square foot home, you can only build a 3,000 square foot home because of this tree.
That's not what we do.
Nope.
Right, yeah.
The zoning takes, we never tell them you cannot do it. It has to be something practical they can do because, and maybe this needs to be rephrased to reflect better our current practice, that we're not sending people back for another $20,000 worth of redesign. But what it does, like a lot of these designers don't take into account trees at all. Or it's intentionally on top of trees, like the outdoor shower or the walkway. So if we don't have something, that will only get worse. Oh, we're allowed to have our front walkway and we have 100 square feet that we can use for it. So let's make it in multiple curves so it hits all 4 trees in the front yard. We will see that.
How would we handle this situation? You've got, they've got a driveway on the right side of their house. It's clear and free and could be 9 foot by 36 feet, so they could get 2 cars there. However, they prefer to have a shallower driveway, and so they want one on the left side of the property and the right side of the problem. However, on the left side of the property, they have a 18-inch pine tree that needs to come down to accommodate that. Will we go so far as to say, no, you have to put your drive on the right side, you can't take down that tree?
Well, that kind of solves itself, right? Because they can't have 2 curb cuts. But
Oh,
I
no,
have that
no, they
problem.
can, they can. They can have 2 curb cuts.
for new construction, no.
Why not?
Can you
It's
Liz
a
told me,
maximum.
this is my issue, because we have a tree right in the middle of the front yard, and Liz says we can't have 2 curb cuts.
No, don't look at me. I don't have those rules. Those are building and licensing rules. But I think they have a maximum, because I don't want to speak out of turn, but this is really Matt's area of expertise, but they have a maximum width of that curb cut, and including the flare. And I think to have 2 separate ones when you include the required flare
Would be past the maximum.
is over that maximum. I'm like,
Okay.
but theoretically, if they
uh,
did and they had another reasonable, this is where we use the word reasonable alternative, we would tell them, well, 18, I'd have to look
Okay,
at the pine
change
tree.
the scenario. I can see that. Change the scenario that they want a double drive instead of a single drive. And there's a tree in there on the left side of that double drive.
I'd be willing to hear the reasoning why they need it. That's usually where we go, hey, why did you do this? Say we have a adult in our household living with paralysis and they needed the double wide driveway to get out, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Or we just want them to be side by side. In that case, we would request that they put them stacked.
The whole thing is curious. You know, we have it
Yeah.
in there, but the reality is it really enforceable? Because
Well,
We have been.
whether it's enforceable or not, you're most likely, people are going to read it and think, I would hope, well, let me don't even go that far. Instead of me being fined for it, I'm going to, ask forgiveness instead of permission, kind of thing. That, when I'm designing this, here's the parameters that are outlined in the code, and if I find that, I don't like those trees in my front yard because it makes moss grow on my roof, and my grass doesn't grow because there's too much shade, then I'll make my sidewalk so that I got to take all those trees out. I mean, you got to kind of think through it in that sense of whether you are, what reasoning's behind this that's truly going to make you make the decision. So if somebody is, I got to have grass growing in my front yard and I've got 4 trees right there now and I want grass, then they're going to push the envelope. But if they think, well, these trees are beautiful and, they really add value to the home and to the surroundings, then I'll live with, something else instead of grass. I just think it is, in that sense, a deterrent, if you will, or at least making somebody think twice about actually what I'm going to do. That's the way I approach it. I don't know, Liz, if that's a thought.
I'd agree with that. I mean, I have a lot of times, say I see a tree plan for a developer or builder, and I'm like, I look at it and I'm just like, why? Look at all these trees coming out. And I talked to him. He said, well, just so you know, I already talked to my designer and, you know, we can't flip the house because of XYZ. Like, this is the best we can do because I already know you were going to ask me, what can we do XYZ? But we got a utility pole here and the power box here. And so it does play in some people's minds during the design. And it does deter some of that curving path to take out 13 of trees in the front and side yard. But it won't work for everybody, right? There'll always be that person who's determined and cares enough that they want them out and they'll go to Park and Shade for it.
So that's then their avenue is to go to Park and
Right.
Shade.
Exactly.
And, you know, as you said earlier, that's the 30-day delay, and in,
More than that, 60.
well, 60 days, and time is money, as you stated. So there are individuals that can afford to do that, and others that choose not to because it's a different type of investment for them. So
Yeah.
I support that. I mean, you know, Glenn, you said the word reasonable, but what about like an alternate reasons or something? I mean, there are some alternate language or,
Such efforts,
yeah.
I mean, may include. And maybe we need to change some of those things to make it more realistic, but
Again, it's trying to just, if you will, make people think, you know, as to,
when we go to court, that's a whole nother story.
Well,
Yeah, I mean,
That's
right,
what
right,
he's
right.
looking at.
Well, right. I mean, I have concerns about this section from a legal perspective, but I do think it has utility similar to site plan review, where if a code compliant plan comes before the planning commission on site plan review, ultimately it's going to be approved, but it's an opportunity to attach reasonable conditions and make changes to the site plan that makes sense in the greater context of what we're trying to do in the city. In this case, protect trees. So it provides utility in that Liz gets to have a conversation about things that can be done to protect trees. But ultimately, I have concerns if we're challenged legally because we imposed some draconian type condition that,
and I don't disagree, but without this, that opportunity for conversation would not even take place.
And have we had any legal challenges?
no. Well, I mean,
That's my question.
Yeah.
we haven't had any challenges that have went to court. I'm trying to recall if we had any that came before you, because remember, Parks and Shade Tree Commission decisions are appealed here.
Yeah.
But we haven't had any that actually went to a
Not
state.
on that issue.
Yes. Yeah, the shed. The shed came to the commissioners where this like 40-inch maple was
Oh,
pushing,
Oh, okay, the shed was one of
concrete
the
and a
issues.
shed up.
Yeah, okay.
That's
yeah.
right.
which could have easily been remedied.
Right. Okay.
And
Yeah.
I forget what happened. The commissioner or the Park and Shade voted to keep it, and the commissioners overturned that, I believe.
No.
What happened? I can't remember.
Parks and Shade Tree authorized it to come out and it was appealed. And
Oh,
then,
that's-
and then
that's
the
what it
commissioners
was.
upheld the taking
Yes.
out, right? So, yeah, I mean,
Similar to this.
but still, there aren't very many of those. And in the meantime, a lot of people have tweaked their plans slightly. So, I mean, is this just a matter of getting the legal language right, do you think, Glenn?
Perhaps, I mean,
If so, we could
perhaps.
work on that.
I'd be happy to wordsmith it some,
Yeah.
you know, I don't know if you ever get a section like this perfectly right, because it's really one of those squishy sections where it provides for an opportunity for discussion.
Well, and
But we can probably do better, so
Glenn,
I'll.
here's he's never gonna love it because it's always something that could be challenged, but it probably could be better, right?
Okay,
That's where we're
then
getting
let's-
to.
let's
If we
work
want to
with Glenn
keep
to try
some
to get it.
semblance of it.
And I think we do want to keep some semblance of it. Yeah.
And Commissioner Gay, I guess I've been very quiet thus far. Yes, I have. And I'm just trying to pay particular attention to the overall of what we're trying to do here. And what I don't support is really trying to pave the way for an elimination of trees, because it's the path of least resistance.
Yeah, right, exactly.
And so I'm probably going to remain quieter today, because I don't think that's our goal, is to pave a way to exacerbate the loss of trees that we are already experiencing. So
I would agree with that. Liz, I thought I heard you say you might have an issue with the new number 7 that was added by the Planning Commission, that the tree could be removed where it interferes with the root or crown development of a larger, healthy, protected tree.
Could be any tree.
Well,
I mean, that is just so open-ended. It doesn't even, I mean, that could be a neighbor's tree. It could be an invasive tree that then comes down. It could be a tree that you know, is in the middle of where they're going to build a new house. And I mean, it's just so open-ended. It seems like it was put there for a specific reason.
I think it's one of those
Like a-
that was,
a
and again,
person-
their version was done, you know, like 7 years ago, but I think it was probably put there because it's one of these quality over quantity, you know, arguments. If somebody wants to protect a larger, you know, healthy tree, then shouldn't they be able to do that?
I mean, look at a forest.
Yeah, yeah.
I know a yard is a lot different than a forest, but certain trees are meant to grow in the understory, like dogwood or redbud. They're perfectly happy being beneath a 60-foot tall oak tree. That's what they
Right.
exist for.
Yeah, yeah, okay.
I can think of like one or two times where this actually, like, another tree was growing on top of an existing tree. That's it. That's all I can really think of. There's no case where, I mean, I'm trying to remember when I worked in New York City, we had a like really famous tree, and it was huge. I mean, like 60 inches diameter, and they kept the canopy. This is in the middle of a park, but they kept the drip line, so from the edge of the canopy in, clear of all vegetation. It was just mulch. But that's that's like a historic tree. That's
Right.
a lot different than saying, hey, I got this 10-inch pine tree and I got this 9-inch oak tree underneath it, and I really don't like this oak.
Okay.
But it's
okay.
growing under the canopy of then we start expanding into neighbors' yards. I just don't see where this really helps anybody that's applied for a permit. Like I said, maybe
Well, do
once or
we-
twice in a couple of years.
Do we want to take it out?
What line number are
Not in
you?
there now.
It's-
It's not in there now. It was a
395.
395. It was added, you know, in the planning commission's version.
If it stays, it has to be more specific.
Well, I
This
think one of the
is-
things we talked about is a protected tree on the same lot to prevent it from being like a
I
Well,
mean,
you,
neighbor's tree or something.
well, it's mentioned later on mitigation of protected trees, right? Lines 544 to
Okay,
547.
I knew I'd put it somewhere.
Mitigation shall
on
be
the same
required
lot,
for the
right.
loss of any protected tree except
Yep,
when a
that's
protected
true.
tree is removed because it's located where it interferes with the root or crown development of a larger, healthy, protected tree. And somebody added on the same
I
lot.
added that based on discussions with Liz.
When we get to it, I want to discuss on the same lot, because I don't know that I agree with that.
well, think about it this way too, is that they have up till 8 inches to get rid of that smaller tree before it becomes protected,
Yeah,
right?
Okay.
So there needs to be, if you keep that, there needs to be some species limitation, whether or not there's a lot limitation, because then we really get, we could have, I've seen trees that cover 4 lots, okay, their canopy. So it gets very, very complicated to, I guess, enforce, use. And then larger, healthy tree, how much larger? 1 inch larger, 10-inch larger?
yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
So are we back to 25329
Yeah, and
mitigation of
line
trees, or are we up
395.
at number 7, line
Yeah, we're at line,
395?
yeah, that's where we are.
395.
And the question is whether to take that out or not. I guess.
It seemed to me that to remove it would, as you say, right now, the way it's listed, it's very difficult to enforce. And there may be other aspects in the code that could solve the same problem.
I think we're looking at a problem that
Doesn't
I've not
exist.
seen in practicality. And whether or not they're just not applying for permits, I can't tell you, but like I said, in my mind, twice in 6 years doesn't warrant lines
Well, and
in
as you
code.
said, you can now, since the definition of protected tree is now a larger tree protected, if something is 4 inches, they can take it out.
Yeah,
It's not protected.
yeah, so,
This would make it much simpler to interpret, to remove it then?
Yeah, I think so.
And you're just relying on size.
Right. Yeah.
Well, I have troubles with that.
Well, but size and the fact that Liz said just because it's growing underneath does not mean it's a bad thing.
You have an 8-inch oak growing under a 14-inch loblolly. You're valuing the conifer way over the tree that's really doing great on stormwater protection and
Well, in this case, you'd be protecting the loblolly, in the way this
yeah,
is worded.
You're protecting the loblolly because
okay.
it's bigger.
Right.
the fact that it doesn't function as well with either oxygen respiration
Right.
or stormwater management or
Well, that's why this should come
any of
out.
those things. Huh?
That's why this should come out.
Oh, I'm thinking that we're doing this on size. The 8-inch tree stays and the 4-inch, or the 20-inch tree stays and the 8-inch tree goes. And the 8-inch tree happens to be a much more valuable tree.
Well, no, it's
in the-
worded
in
as
the
larger.
canopy, huh?
It's worded that the one you're going to save is the larger one. That's how it's worded.
Maybe I'm.
So that's why maybe it's not a good provision at all for the example you just gave. But it doesn't sound like it's a good provision
Well,
based on
ta-
what Liz
let's
is
take
saying.
that a step further. What if what if you have a 15-inch, this is how I would think of this, a 15-inch ailanthus, which is a highly invasive species,
Yep.
with a 10-inch white oak growing beneath it.
Mm-hmm.
Under this, you could remove the oak, and then you could come back and you could remove the ailanthus because it's invasive and listed.
Right, right. Yeah. I mean, it just seems like this is problematic. You know, I mean, maybe the intention was good, but in practice, you haven't actually seen it.
The intention is good. I get where the intention is coming from, but I think with having that 8-inch,
I was going to say, perhaps when this was written, that 8-inch aspect
That's right.
wasn't existing.
Yeah, that's true. It wasn't there. Yeah. Okay. Now we go to number 9, where we need to, and Liz, we really need your help on this, where we want to add a provision allowing for the removal of trees for any reason if the minimum density is maintained, the tree is not a protected tree, meaning it's under 8 inches, and the tree removed is replaced. I have had some questions about the third one, that if the minimum density is maintained and you have protected trees on the lot, why does the tree removed need to be replaced?
Yes, I agree.
Yeah,
well, what is minimum? Where's
Basic-
your replacement? Sorry, don't we have like a replacement table or something in here?
there's, yeah, further up, there is information on,
Like,
well, I don't know. Thank you. 554. Yeah, well, that's for protected trees, remove the quantity of replacement trees. But this is basically saying that that the tree can be removed if it's not a protected tree, but even so, it has to be replaced. And that does seem inconsistent with the other provisions.
I think what it's saying is, say you meet the minimum density and you want to take out one of those trees. Say it's 3 trees and you want to take out one of those 3. You can do it as long as you replace it to then meet minimum density again.
Okay, then that's not worded right. So-
Does that make sense? as
Yeah,
to-
Yeah, add removal of trees for any reason.
Provided the tree removed is replaced to maintain minimum
Yeah,
tree
okay,
density.
yeah, right?
What lines are we back? I lost
The
my
401.
place. 401, okay.
And removing doesn't affect the density.
That's why it has to be, the removal does affect the density, makes it
Yeah.
not meet density. That's why we're saying they have to replace it, but they don't have to meet one of those reasons listed, right? You can just change your mind, basically.
Yeah, remove
So
tree for
say
any
you
reason.
planted 3 new trees for new construction, you had 0 and you planted 3.
Mm-hmm.
And 2 years later, you're like, why in the world did the builder choose this tree? I hate this tree
Mm-hmm.
for whatever reason. I just want to take it out and put a different one in. You can, provided you
You
have
do
a
it.
new tree to meet minimum density.
Yeah, but I think the issue here is it's reading like, even if you have 10 trees on your lot and you take one out, you're allowed to take it out because it's not protected and you have the minimum density, but you still got to replace it. And I don't think that's the intention.
No,
Okay.
no, I don't think so.
Okay,
Because I
so-
remember us talking about this. And
Wording, did you just say? Stan, you said something about provided that minimum tree density is maintained?
Provided the tree removed is replaced to maintain
Okay.
minimum tree
Yeah.
density.
Yeah, okay, that's
That'll-
good.
that'll fix
Yep, okay,
yeah, so it's any tree required for minimum density.
right,
That's what it is.
right, okay.
Done.
Forgive me, the way I read this is, let's say you have 10 trees on your property. The minimum density requirement is 3, correct? The way I read this is you are able to take down 7 of those trees because the minimum tree density is maintained.
Yeah.
So then
And we
you've
may have some public comment
Then
on
you've
this
got to have that provision that provided the trees removed are replaced. Okay,
This one's confusing me.
I think we have public comment on this one too, so do you want to do that?
Sure.
Yeah.
Stephanie, go ahead, come ahead up to the microphone again. Just state your name again if you would.
Stephanie Smith. I don't think we should require homeowners to have more trees than the minimum density, because that is quite a lot. I have a lot that's bigger than 50 by 100 feet, but if you have a 50 by 100 lot, and you have 3 trees that meet all these requirements, they're as big as they need to be, et cetera. You know, there's also value in being able to have some sunshine and plant flowering specimens that require sunshine, even to have a small vegetable or herb garden in your backyard. So I was really happy to hear that you could remove a tree if it's not protected, it's not historic, it's not specimen, and you're already meeting minimum density requirements. On my lot, I have to have 5 trees. 5 trees are a lot of trees if you also have to account for, you know, the driveway and the other plantings that you want to have. We actually can barely grow grass. In fact, we're taking more of it out and putting more mulch. And I do think there's something to be said for private property rights. It is my lot. And I knew going into this, the requirements I had to meet in Rehoboth, the minimum density. And I have done that. But I don't think I should have to meet more than the minimum density requirements.
Thank you, Stephanie.
Yeah, okay. Yes, and Carolyn has a question.
And not all of us have big lots, you know, the typical lot's 50 by 100, but I'm on a 50 by 84, so it makes it challenging there.
Carolyn Diefender for
Yeah.
113 Newcastle. I too think there should be some provision, even if a protected tree has to come down, let's say it dies. We have one that probably dead. There should be some provision to look at what's left on the lot in determining whether or not you have to plant additional trees. Like the size of the tree we have, we're gonna have to plant 3 or 4 trees. And yes, that is a reduction
undo
from
that.
the current code. But we already have trees on the lot, and to add 3 or 4 more, you know, just makes that, you know, we too have trouble growing grass. The other thing I want to point out is for example, there's a house that we walk by often in, say, Schoolview, and there are literally 20 trees in the backyard. And I've not measured them, but I'm sure some of them are considered protected because of their size. If one of those comes down, to say that they have to add more when they've got 20 in the backyard seems ludicrous to me.
And the replacement things are up ahead in the mitigation section, so I guess there's, that.
Right,
Yeah,
but
we'll talk about
so
that there, but
I
that's,
just think
yeah.
there needs to be some kind of mitigation for what you are left with when you take any tree down, whether it's protected or not.
Okay,
Thank you, Carolyn.
yeah.
Well, and so this is the conversation we've been having on and off for, before I even started here, is mitigation versus tree for tree.
Right, yeah, and
you can't have, it's just, you can't have both. And
Right.
all the different iterations, the law oversight, the planning commission, and now the commissioners have chosen the tree for tree just for the sake of simplicity.
Right, but
So-
even that, there are issues with, it sounds like.
Nothing is, yeah, I mean,
But that's in the mitigation section, so I think we have to get to that point. For this provision, we can just
think we need to
clarify that it is to maintain tree minimum density, but not to replace anything that comes out. Right, so it's the allowance for removal of a smaller tree.
tree, right, under 8, trees
Yeah,
required for minimum
protect-
density.
Or protected, yeah,
Under 8 inches.
right,
just the scenario I said where they have 3 new trees and they don't want one of them. They
Right.
changed their mind. They don't want an oak, they want a red maple.
Right. Okay.
Okay.
Then
B.
there, yeah, I don't know why it's B. I guess there was an A before, but obviously that should be A. This is just for, I guess that's basically a lot clearing. If there's an application to remove 10 or more trees, there needs to
Susan,
be
where are
erosion
you? What
control.
line,
Oh,
Nora?
line 404.
Thank you, 404.
404.
I don't think we need that anymore now.
Because,
with-
yeah, because we already have that stormwater ordinance.
Yeah,
right?
if they're disturbing more than 1,000 square feet.
But,
I can't think of any time that the stormwater ordinance wouldn't be triggered that they're removing more than 10 trees.
so you would not remove 10 or more trees. There's no way you'd be removing 10 or more trees that doesn't involve at least 1,000 square feet, is what you're saying.
It doesn't involve some sort of construction.
But the stormwater ordinance, is it 1,000 or is it everything? I thought it was, is it 1,000?
You guys would know better than me.
Yeah, I mean, I just.
I just can't think of a scenario. I mean, a scenario that's occurred. I can think of one. Okay, you have 10 dead trees in your backyard. But,
Right.
I mean, but in all practicality, I can't think of a time when that's happened that they didn't have to already have the silt fence.
Okay, so you think that basically this is obsolete?
Yeah, it's just doubling up on something.
Okay.
Even if it occurred once every 5 years, I still don't think it's worth having it in the code.
Okay, let's see. Yeah, and there was a land clearing permit before. Okay, so should we take it out because it's been made obsolete by the stormwater code that we put in place about a year and a half ago?
And reiterate, that's lines 404.
404 to 408?
408.
Yeah, activity disturbing 1,000 square feet of land area.
Yeah, okay. Then B here are the exempt activities. And it's removal of any tree in an existing utility easement or public right-of-way, with some provisions about under the control of the utility company. Then removal of any tree for the purpose of maintaining an existing legally required access to the property. And the third one is removal of any tree destroyed or damaged beyond saving by extreme weather, which just means that if it's in danger of falling and a storm has come along, you don't have to go through the process of filing a permit.
So that's not how we do things now. If there's something urgent, they still have to do at least like a retroactive permit.
Really? Okay, because it's actually, it's in
because
the current code.
You got to keep track of that stuff. Otherwise, you end up hurting yourself for the future. So then, say they have a tree that they said was falling over in a storm, and I go out for my 2-year inspection, and there's no tree there because, unbeknownst to them, now they don't meet minimum density, or
Right.
now they don't meet the current mitigation or whatever. So we've always kind of retroactively said, fill out a permit. It's for your own good to track that, so that somebody doesn't come out in the future and be like, wait, you're missing a tree.
So,
Well, that's actually, we've had a real life scenario. You know, that first snow we had, and less so for the second one, but for that first snow, I had trees in my yard and in my neighborhood that literally came down and the top touched the ground. And one of the neighbor's trees completely broke off about 8 feet above the ground. So I don't know that tree, I don't want to tattletale on them, but I don't know that tree was part of the minimum density, but they're likely to come out and cut the rest of it down because the tree's ruined at this point. And yet they might not meet the minimum density. So who would ever know until a future date if they filed a building permit?
But say they did,
application.
say it was a new house and that was on there, and then I go out for an inspection and it's not there anymore, and they can't provide any evidence that it was storm damage. They don't have pictures or anything like that. We are left with no choice but to fine them and enact the penalties and violations
Yeah.
section. That's part of my job. I have to do it. It's not, so it's really for the property owner's own good that it is tracked.
and you say you're doing that now?
Yes. Because we've had, when I first started, we had problems with this where people were saying
Yeah.
it was eminent, and then I go and look at it, and it's like one broken branch. It's not eminent. It's one
Right.
cut. It's
Yeah.
not the whole tree. I think we do have something in the current code that if it's declared a state of emergency, that certain things are suspended, which I think is fine. I've been through those in other jobs, and during, like, when you have something like a Hurricane Sandy hit, you can't worry about stuff like that. But a snowstorm that topples some arborvitaes, I mean, there's a difference between those two.
So then we should only exempt damage during states of emergency? Is that what you're saying?
I'm not even saying that. I'm just saying,
Well, our last snow
Was not a state of
was
emergency.
not a state of emergency.
And the pandemic was, so it means people could have taken down trees during.
well, you could say weather, like a weather state of emergency. That'd be funny. Had to remove the tree for COVID.
Yeah, right, exactly.
To your window.
Well, do you think, all right, well, do we think that if somebody's tree is damaged during just a nor'easter, a typical nor'easter we have
Happens.
several of every year,
It happens, yeah.
do you think they should be, and that's their only tree, do we think they should have to replace it? Not how much to replace it, but do you think we should at least have to have them put in another tree?
Well, that would seem to be a loophole in the current, in that this is in the current code, and it sounds like they would have to replace it, but we don't, but you're saying you track it so that you know that.
Yeah, there's something in the current code, any tree damaged, like from weather or something, it's only like a half mitigation.
Oh, okay.
It does mention that in the code, and I've used it. If it is a storm damaged tree, they are only, and say it's 30 inches, they only have to have 15 of mitigation.
Stephanie, did you want to say something?
This is, in the scheme of things, a minor comment, but as a homeowner, let's just say that was I'm your neighbor and it's my tree that went down. So I have to pay a $20 processing fee because of storm damage, and then I have to come and pay $100 or $150, I've lost track, to have Liz look at my tree plan because in this storm, this happened to me. I don't know. I think the average person on the street is going to think, good grief, I have to replace my tree because it did. Now I'm not in minimum density, and I have to pay, $150 more plus another 20 for her to certify that yes, it died during the storm. Sometimes people think enough is enough.
Thank you. That's a good point.
Okay,
Good point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what do we do here?
Could somehow just be affected by storm damage or?
It says that. Well, it says extreme weather conditions, insects, diseases, or fire. So,
I will say, I've never had a complaint of people doing the retro tree permits from storm damage. And I tell them it's all about tracking, honestly. I've never had, to my face at least, or in email, never had a complaint about it.
well, let me ask you this. What about numbers 1 and 2? Is the same thing true there where if they're taking out a tree to maintain a legally required access to property, or they're taking out a tree for an existing utility easement, that you'd like a record of that too? So that so that you could know if they're meeting density? Because in that case, the
Number
entire
one.
exempt section should say that something has to be filed with the city. I mean, it may not be, certainly not an application fee, it might not even be a processing fee, but that notice has to be given to the city, and so that minimum tree density is maintained, or something like that.
So for number 1, if the power company is removing a tree, they have a fantastic communication system with the city.
Yeah.
And they do apply for permits if they are required to. And the property owner is held to replanting requirements
Okay.
if they come up. Number 2 has not happened, to my knowledge here, because that means you'd have to let a tree grow directly in front of, like, your front door. So I'm not really...
Yeah.
I'm sure in some places that does happen. Here, everybody, for the most part, takes nice care of their property. I just can't see in which case a tree that would get to be 8 inches or larger in front of your front door.
So-
That being said, there's no problem with it being in there, but And I'm sure there's a reason it's in there.
Yeah, it's in the current one, so it was written back then.
Just to nitpick, I'm sorry to do that, but when it says access to property, does that mean like my driveway? It prevents my access to my driveway? Property, I think you jumped to the fact that that's the structure,
Yeah.
but I'm just, is it,
Well, what's legally required access for the lawyer?
Well, I think it's the same.
He's like,
I think it's the same scenario. If a tree grew in the middle of your driveway that's been authorized by the city, then you'd probably be exempt under this section, just like if it's in the front door.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But like I
Okay.
said, I'm sure it's in here because somewhere there's some obscure legal code that says there has to be, like, maybe the property maintenance code, that there has to be an it has to
Right.
be accessible.
That may
But this just has never come into play.
I guess what I'm wondering about is if these are exempt activities, but we're still wanting permits to be issued, why are they under subsection B exempt activities? Why aren't they just in the subsection A, which is those things for which you will issue a permit?
Oh, that's a good point. I think it may be a timing issue, right? If something is a danger in a storm, it's got to come out right away. They don't have time to get, right?
Yeah, most of the time you got to think about how these storms go too. You take the call in the office, you send out the sales arborist. Sales arborist then goes back and triages how dangerous,
Yeah.
who's my better client, all that type of stuff. They're not out within 15 to 20 minutes. So I allow them to just turn in the permit. They send me, usually the salesperson will say, hey, we've got a down tree, picture attached. And I say, thanks for letting me know. Please proceed and make sure you fill out a retro permit. And then I print out that email to make sure that it actually gets done.
But retro permits is an
No need-
oxymoron.
Right.
I mean, it's just- I
Exactly.
think that's what you're trying to get behind,
Yeah.
Glenn, right? A retro permit.
But we're not holding somebody else up if they have a tree leaning on their neighbor's fence that they want to get removed. I'm not saying, okay, well, you got to submit your permit, and then I got to
That's why it's under exempt instead of.
schedule a
instead
meeting,
of
and then I
allowed.
got to go out and review it. And
That's why it's under exempt.
that would be silly.
Okay. All right. So, in that case, should there still be some exemptions, whether it's all these three or only some of these three, but still should be some exemptions with a requirement that notice be given to the city?
I mean, that's what I'm thinking. Because really, do you need to issue a permit, or do you just need notice that this happened so you can track it somehow?
Permit is how we track.
Yeah.
We have munis.
Well,
It has to be a
Right.
permit. Sticking an email in a folder,
Right.
that just doesn't cut it, honestly. I mean, also coming from someone who did sales for multiple years and went through several storms, you can get away with a lot during a storm if you have this exemption. Now, I'm not going to say I was innocent in that when I was in sales, but I mean, we had historic districts where I had to submit resistographs and consulting reports and stuff like that to be able to get tree removal permits. So if we had a derecho, who knows? And I wasn't, there's a lot of unscrupulous tree companies out, and we're pretty good here, but who knows what happened during those times,
Liz, just out of curiosity, I completely follow you when you're talking about tree companies.
Yeah.
But if the homeowner is just got a chainsaw, which I have a lot of interaction with folks who have chainsaws, that's just all being done in today's environment. Would you agree?
Well, think about too, this code, it has to be 8 inches. Most homeowners aren't taking out 20-inch tree. Well, I hope not.
That's
taking
true.
out 20-inch
That's true.
trees, because they might one wrong thing and it goes the other way,
Yeah.
and you don't have a shed anymore.
Yeah.
But I get very few tree removal permits that say owner, and
Okay.
honestly, out of the couple a year I get that say owner, I bet it's typically a friend that was a tree climber or
Yeah.
somebody that has a chainsaw, and because our lots are too small to
Yeah.
really notch and drop a tree. You have to have somebody that knows what they're doing, climbing up, roping, all that type of stuff.
Okay.
Do we have a group of approved tree removal companies, don't we, in the city?
that are licensed in the city,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, so
I mean, could we put I don't want to say the onus, but rather than having the owner who has to go through getting the permit or getting the processing fee, is that something that could be handled just by the tree removal companies rather than, and have them bill back the
Most of the tree removal companies are the ones that submit the permit. Very few are done by the owner, I
Are they?
find. Because the tree removal company knows exactly what we need, and they're
And
able
they'll
to submit
charge,
it.
and then they charge the homeowner.
Yeah.
Okay.
What they charge the homeowner, I can't tell you. I,
Well, that segues with one of my two points I have. One is, that if they have storm reporting and a permit, I could see saying that there's no fee for that due to a storm. But for me, the bigger component is education. We've got to educate. Maybe it's the tree companies that we educate. That would be the easiest thing. Hey, for storm damage removal, you have to file a permit. But additionally, I think we would have to inform the homeowners because they don't know. Nobody knows. Nobody remembers. There are very few people, honestly, that are 100% attuned to what this is. And when a storm comes, their mind's elsewhere. They're not thinking about having to file.
And we also had a bunch in my neighborhood with the last storm, but everybody, I would say within the week, had removed or picked up they were smaller trees, but I don't think people will leave them around.
And most
But I did
like-
not know you should have had a permit or would need a
Well,
permit
it's actually
myself.
you don't, according to, it's exempt. That's, it's exempt, but Liz is saying that,
for their own good, most tree companies tell me and submit a
and that's
permit.
what we're trying to do, is codify how they're exempt, but to say what kind of notice is needed.
Tree companies should know for sure. If it's branches on the ground, your homeowner will pay, but if it's like my neighbor was like 10-inch or 12-inch tree, you have to hire somebody to do
Oh,
that.
absolutely. Oh,
You
yeah.
don't know.
But what's the code part? I mean, what's,
Well,
what do they have to do?
What do we want to do? That's what you guys we have to come to an agreement on. Do we want to say whatever, if there's a storm, you can remove whatever you want with no tracking? And I mean, this says where it has been determined to be such by the city, right? So that to me says they need to give me something. If I'm the one
It also says
determining,
there's time involved, and they can't do it right away under their own, under their own power. Let's see
Okay,
what- yeah,
Carolyn here,
yeah.
go ahead.
Carolyn Diefendorfer, 113 Newcastle. The only thing I would say on this is specifically put in here that a retroactive permit should be filed with the city. I agree with not charging. If your tree came down, and maybe through an education process, saying to a homeowner, take pictures before you start to, clean up your yard. Because, we don't have a chainsaw, but we might go rent one and cut up our own tree just to save money with hiring a tree company to come if the tree truly came down in the storm. So that's all I would do, is do some clarification and some education.
Thank you, Carolyn.
Just put a time limit, 14 days. You have 14 days to file a permit to apply. Call it retro or call it after the fact or whatever you want.
That's why I'm wondering if it has to be permit, or if it's a notice, or, because these are exempt activities.
Oh,
that
but you,
by definition, you don't need a permit for.
well, do we-
Liz says he wants
Yeah.
a permit, right?
I mean, the permit's the only
Oh,
way.
the
to
only
tr-
way to
It's
system.
the only way to track it. I
right.
mean, as much as you might say,
Right, I
okay,
get it.
take a picture, print out the email.
Right,
That
right.
means every time we want to go do something with that property, we have to go upstairs, pull the file, and sort through.
I meant an official notice. I didn't mean
Yeah.
an email. I meant an official notice, but you're saying permit is the only.
We can track
Cross-
a permit and a
So
notice of
maybe then
violation.
there just has to be a checkbox or something on the permit
A non-fee
for
permit,
things in this category.
Yeah.
a non-fee exempt permit or
Yeah.
something like that.
Right.
Yeah.
An exempt, yeah. This is a permit for an exempt activity, right? As one of the options.
I mean, we can
right.
still, in the current code, we have that waiver where we, for windstorm, ice storm,
Yeah,
we can
I think that
declare
is
it.
further up. I've seen that further up in here, yeah.
Yeah. And don't forget, dead trees are exempt from that $50 fee.
I know, yeah. Well, dead or
already.
diseased, but I don't think storm damage. I was thinking of that as Carolyn was talking, because we may want to add the storm there. I don't know.
Exempt from that $50
Right, right.
fee.
Yep. Okay, well, so should we just, I don't want to spend too much more time on this. Should we just finesse this by saying that there will be something filed after the fact for it?
Create
Okay.
an exempt permit,
Yeah.
something
Well,
of that
that's-
nature.
Yeah.
Well, it's the same permit. If the tree's dead, I just write in the description, no fee for dead tree. I mean, no
Okay.
fee for storm damaged,
Right.
whatever it
But are we
is.
still charging the 20?
Yes, it only
See,
gets,
That's beyond, I mean, that's already in there in general, like, it's not part of this one, so.
I mean, the city can't be taking financial losses on this too, right? We got to at least try to cover some of our time. That's the whole reason we had those fees in there.
Okay. Well, all right, we'll put in something about a permit being filed after the fact for the exempt activities. So the next thing on line 424, the display of permit, which is the same as the current code. And for most kinds of permits, they're required to be displayed, so this is no different. And then D for the application just says that for the tree removal application, that there's a statement of ownership, legal description, and a boundary survey or scale drawing, and then the tree plan if required. And an erosion control plan if required, but should we take, D is on line 442 on the next page. Does that come out based on the fact that we already took the other erosion out? Okay, so that's obsolete because we have a separate erosion control section in the code. So any questions about the components of the application or the display of the permit?
We need an estimate too from the tree contractor.
On the application? Okay, yeah. I
That's
think
part
I've
of
seen that.
what they submit.
Okay,
Tree survey, estimate, and the actual one-page application.
okay. Okay. All right. Okay, so the next one, if the application for a building or demolition permit or subdivision or site contemplates activity on the lot which is intended or may reasonably affect any tree as described below, then an application for a tree removal permit shall be submitted and processed concurrently. That is somewhat redundant with an earlier provision that says that they're going to be reviewed by the department simultaneously. So,
And I think the mayor wasn't fond of that anyways, so maybe this kind of,
yeah, so I
Takes
guess.
care of
But I
it.
thought we were leaving that in there.
or looking at if it could go somewhere else, I think I forget what,
Right, okay, yeah.
we're talking about the same thing, I can't remember which line.
Yeah,
it's on
line
now.
319 says review of tree plan will proceed in the same manner by the same city officials responsible for reviewing and approving the application for building permit, et cetera, and this is basically repeating that. So do we leave it here and take it out of the section on tree plan? Or do we leave it here and leave it here and take it out of the tree plan? I guess that's what we're
I
saying.
think it's better here.
Yeah, I think
Makes
so.
more sense to me here.
I think so, yeah. Because it goes on to talk about other things that are needed for the application. So then we would take out 319 to 321 lines, Stan? Okay.
318 to,
I have 319 to 321. So then the other thing, so then the filing of the application shall be deemed to extend permission for the city to inspect the property. I think that's necessary. I think these are all probably in the code now. Then what about the next one, Liz? It says, for applications that are not processed concurrently, although we've said that they have to be processed concurrently, but this says if they're not processed concurrently.
Well, they submit it after the fact, or it's not tied to a building permit.
Oh, I see, okay. In which case, longer periods of time may occur. The city shall have a reasonable time, following the receipt of the application to make a determination on whether a permit shall be granted. So this is another use of reasonable, but since it's city staff time, we don't want to commit to a specific time, right? So is reasonable okay?
Reasonable's fine there
Okay.
in that context, yeah.
Okay,
should we also add partitioning in there?
okay,
Mhm.
yep. Okay, and then the next one, any permit issued is valid for 6 months. I think that's pretty standard, and may be renewed for a second 6-month period. Or it says, or the city may require reapplication and full review. So even after the first 6 months, you can require a new application? Or do
Yeah,
you?
that's what it said. I don't think I think maybe once or twice somebody has extended their permit, but that's not common.
But are you willing for them to extend it with no questions asked? Because this is saying that the city could require reapplication? Are we saying it can be renewed for an additional 6 months, no matter what?
I would just leave it as it is.
I'd leave it as if
Okay.
some law changes or something and you want them to be subject to the new changed law, you
Yeah.
Okay.
want them to reapply.
All right.
Yeah, I mean, the tree's not gonna magically come back to life, but
And then it says if it's issued concurrently with a building application, that the permit shall be run concurrently with that. Okay. And may be renewed together. Yep, okay. And that issuance of the permit constitutes approval. Okay, so here we come into the application to the removal fee. And I'm trying to remember what that is currently, so let me look at it. But it's starting at line 470.
what the tree removal fee is now,
Yeah, yeah,
$50 from 1 to 100 million trees.
okay.
$50 per permit, I guess I
So
should
this
say.
came up, and I don't remember whether it was, I think it's both in the planning commission one as well as from our tree group. We're trying to say that there needed to be some, I guess, deterrent, for lack of a better word, to really take into account that the bigger trees have value. So to take one out, even except if it's dead or diseased, there's no fee for that. But if it meets the other requirements to be taken out, that it has value and therefore there should be a higher permit fee. Just like there are higher permit fees for more expensive construction because it's a percentage based on the cost of construction. I think that's the meaning behind this, but the numbers are somewhat arbitrary. So, I mean, it's new, so I don't know what you all want to do with that.
Well, you have 3 different ways you can charge a permit fee, right? It could be just a flat fee per tree or per permit. You can charge by inch, or you can charge a combination. And this is the combination.
Yeah.
Currently, we just have a flat fee per permit. So somebody could apply to remove 12 trees on one permit and pay $50
Right.
for a job that cost $12,000. Likewise, I've had permits submitted where they have to pay $50 for a 6-inch dogwood that probably only cost $100 to remove. So
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, and that I think that's what this was meant to get at, was that it takes into account that, and this is total tree, diameter of trees removed, not per tree. But I mean, it's like, so that gets into the fact if you move the 10 trees, so it's probably gonna be more than 24 inches.
yeah.
Whereas if you remove one, then you're paying $50. If you remove the multiple, you're paying $300.
Well, and it might help for a frame of reference that to have a tree crew out at your property for a day is going to cost you around $2,500 to $3,000. Okay, that's
Yeah.
the. When I first started in sales, I had no idea it was that expensive. So just so everybody
Oh,
knows,
yeah,
it's
same.
very expensive.
Yeah.
You can't. It's very hard to get somebody to come out to your property to do tree work for less than $1,000. You just can't. $1,200 was kind of my threshold to where I felt I could actually sell the client like real work,
Right.
like where you could actually do stuff.
I know it's not.
And that was 6 years ago, so 6 to 10 years ago. So I imagine it's, with the gas mileage those trucks get, I think they told me the crane gets about 8 miles to the gallon. You can only imagine that those fees are going to go up. So
these variation in fees are not so much to reflect the amount of work it takes to act on the application, but more of a deterrent
I
or
think that was probably
incentive or
the.
something, more of a
deter-
penalty
the
slash
20
a deterrent.
I think the 25 per tree. Well, I mean, to an extent, the more trees they take out, the more work we do, right? If I'm going out to a woods and I have to identify all the trees, like currently with mitigation, measure every single tree, add up all the inches, that is more work for doing 10 trees versus 1.
Well, you do have 25 per tree.
Yeah.
As well. And the addition, I think, was just to take into account the value of them and I guess a deterrent, yeah.
But the more than 24 inches, we're not talking about a 26-inch tree necessarily. It's talking about the total diameter of the trees removed. So it could be 6 4-inch trees.
No, because you only need a permit if it's protected or if it meets, if it's needed to meet minimum density.
2 12-inch trees.
So it'd be 2 12-inch trees, or it could be smaller ones if they're needed to meet density.
Or it could be 3 30-inch trees, right?
Right, yeah. Yeah, I mean, because it's more than, yes.
step up to the microphone so we can record.
Yeah, you don't need a permit to take out a tree, even if you know you're already meeting minimum density? In other words, we all do have to fill out, to take out any tree,
Right.
we have to do permit work, correct? I thought somebody just said you don't.
Currently, we're talking about the proposed, if
Yeah.
it's smaller. But the issue with that is the minimum density. Most
Yeah.
average homeowners, even the builders and the designers, struggle with that concept, right? Because of minimum density.
Oh, okay.
Most people don't know that if they have 3 dogwoods, they think they meet minimum density, and they don't.
Well, let's just say you do know. You're a responsible homeowner, you've studied the code, you know it inside and out as well as you can as a layperson. And you have 8 trees on your property, you only need 5. You know their caliper, and you're going to take out a tree that you wish you hadn't put in initially, and it is 2 inches in caliper. I still need to fill out a tree
No,
removal
no.
permit under the new code.
No,
Code.
no,
The new one? The
Neither.
new-
no, I don't
Not
think,
proposed
no,
or
not if
existing.
if
Not
if
unless
it's
it
not
was-
needed to meet, if it's needed to meet tree density, minimum density, but if it's not,
I'm not allowed to determine that on my own, I don't think. I have to turn in a plan.
oh, I don't think, no, that's not true, no.
Okay.
If you have
yeah.
a question, I always encourage people, if they have a question, to email me, whether it's
Yeah.
a photo or whatever. And if it's really complicated, the only way to get a true answer for me to visit the site and make an official determination is to submit a tree removal permit. But if you have 10 trees, you have 10 oak trees,
Yeah,
and you want to take out a 3-inch oak,
yeah,
you
can
don't
do
need my permission. You can email me and ask me to make sure.
okay.
But I would
alright.
just say no
And that's in the
permit
current
necessary.
code too, though, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, the only caveat in the current code would be if they were required for mitigation or
And the
something.
protected is smaller in the current code. The protected, I think, is, well, it's
Yeah.
different. It's 4, and some it's 6, depending on the type.
6, it's 3.
Right, yeah, okay.
So I'm confused by this. So if I had 5 trees and I fell within B, the 16 to 24 inches, what would my fee be?
5,
So there's 5 trees I want removed, and they total 20 inches.
I don't, that
So
wouldn't
it'd
be
be
possible.
5
That
times
would really-
25.
25.
But that really wouldn't be possible,
100.
right? Because 8
So what's,
inches.
but I guess where I'm held up, what's the 25 per tree? So is that anything over 4 inches?
So if it was a 25-inch tree, one tree, it'd be $325. And if it was 2 25-inch trees, it'd be $350. If it was one 10-inch tree, it would be $75. I think I'm getting that right.
But, so then that's any tree over 4 inches then?
Mhm.
It counts as the $25.
No.
Yeah, so the only way a tree below 8 would show up in this is if it was required for minimum density planting. So say 3 brand-new trees, you would have to pay those fees. But otherwise, it would mostly be 8 to 15 inches.
And I hate to harp on the old $20, but does this replace the $20 processing fee?
No, this is the permit fee. Processing fee is
The processing
desk.
fee's already been paid, the application fee's already been paid. This is when Liz issues a permit, says, here's your permit, and
Right.
here's your fee at the bottom line.
Yeah, so what I do now is you come into the front desk with a completed tree removal permit. You have everything you need. You pay your $20. The front desk staff takes it in, puts it in, enters it into Munis, processes your payment, puts it in my inbox in the order in which they're received. I go out to the property, I review the permit. If there are any missing information, questions, planting plan needed, I email the applicant. If the permit has everything and it's good to be approved, I issue it Munis. The front desk processes that. It's a very convoluted process.
Then you would determine what the cost was?
And as part of issuing the permit, I determine what the cost is. I add it into Munis and then I write it in the permit description.
And then we should talk about line 479 where it says the fee shall be waived to remove a dead or diseased tree based on independent verification. And I think that came up in our tree committee, Liz, when you said, if you don't agree. In other words, shouldn't it be upon approval by the city arborist or based on independent? In other words, they don't have to get an independent verification if you say it's dead, right?
Well, no, dead is dead.
Right.
The diseased part is
Diseased,
where
okay, yeah.
I've had a few people question it. If you go out and test 10 trees, there's going to be something in them. But just because it has disease doesn't mean it's fatal. I mean, for example, dogwood could have 10 diseases.
But you wanted us to add that about independent verification.
Yeah,
So-
because it should not be up. There are certain diseases like verticillium. You can look at it and say, okay, it has yellow center, has verticillium, tree's going to die.
Right.
The only way to officially, technically prove that is to have a laboratory test. So you can claim all the diseases you want, canker disease, ceridium, this, that, needle cast, etc. But it shouldn't be up to me to say, oh yeah, your tree, it's diseased, so you should get it for free. And it shouldn't be up to the tree company to claim that it has a disease and let me try and say, oh, what tree doesn't have a disease, right? Every tree has, most
Has
trees will
some-
have something going on in them.
So you're saying for anything where the issue is disease and it's not already dead, that you want evaluation, even though you agree
If
that
it's- If they want it waived.
oh, if they want the fee waived.
Most people probably wouldn't go through that, but right now you get that half mitigation. So to pay, I mean, even if you have to pay, some labs like University of Delaware, they do stuff and maybe it's $25, maybe it's free.
Yeah.
Some of the private ones might be $100, but I mean, if it makes a difference right now with the mitigation for the tree planting, it's worth the money.
How long does
But
something
I
like that
think-
take?
It just
Depends
seems,
on their workload, a week maybe.
doesn't seem though that if, I think what the commissioner's trying to say is if everybody agrees that it's diseased, why do we need that
Why do you need
testing? Like I think it should almost be like an appellate deal. If there's a disagreement, then I think you can say, well, go get me a test and verify and I'll waive the fee. But if everybody's in agreement, it seems,
That's how it is now, and I get pushed back every single time. If I say, no, it's that disease is not the cause of it's just, it's a really open door. All right, I have a dogwood that's dying. The dogwood probably has a couple different types of anthracnose, a leaf spot, it might have borers, which is an insect, not a disease. What actually killed it? Are we all in agreement that it is a disease? Sure. But sometimes it's just not that simple.
I guess I'm struggling with a couple things. One is how I read it is you can get the fee waived to remove a dead tree based on an independent verification or based on a diseased tree based on an independent. So to me, some of it's a matter of semantics, but even the extent of the disease, are there not some disease that the independent verification could come back and say, it's a disease, but it's not going to kill it?
Yeah, fatal disease.
Right, so we need to have more specificity there possibly. Let me go to Carolyn here real quick.
Yeah, I agree that there needs to be some clarification, because I too read it the way you do. In, if it's dead, do I have to get an independent lab in order to get the fee waived?
Yeah, right, yeah.
So to me, it's not clear when the lab comes into play.
Well, listen, at the end of the day, if this is only, I mean, I guess for 300, say it's a big tree. So like, yeah, I know your tree, yes. Say it's their tree. That's $300. Might be worth it for them to go to
Yeah,
the
but it's dead
lab.
already, or is it diseased?
We don't know yet.
It's everything.
Okay, okay.
It's everything.
Dying, okay.
It's been
right.
dying for like 5 years.
Right, yeah.
But more than likely, if they are able to take some foliage to the lab and have it tested, that tree will probably come back with a disease, which for them could make a huge difference because that cuts the mitigation in half. Here, where it saves them $300, I don't know if that's worth it or not. That would be up to the individual person. I don't know. By the time you pay somebody to, if you're not testing it yourself, like for their tree, how are they going to get a branch? Because it's like 50 feet up in the air.
Right.
So by the time they have a tree contractor, even if they have like a company that's willing to do it, they're still going to have to charge them something for this service. They're probably at that cost already.
Yeah, I just, because you're going to approve it, but you're saying it affects the mitigation. But we haven't addressed the mitigation currently.
Currently, it affects the
Right.
mitigation. It
Yeah.
cuts it in half.
Okay.
But everybody wants to claim that their big tree that looks sad or is dying has a disease and they should get half and have it for free.
I see what you're saying. So we really shouldn't tie this to mitigation, because otherwise it's a loophole. Right?
Yeah, I mean, if all they're doing is saving, say for some reason they're able to prune the branch themselves, if all they're doing is saving a couple $100, I don't even know if it's worth having
I'm
that
saying.
independent verification through, you know, where if we're talking tree planting, so instead of 8 trees, they have to put in 4 currently, just use that. That could be, you know, $2,500 or something they're saving.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing that we haven't talked about that probably should be in here, wouldn't the fee be waived for those exempt activities that are filed after the fact? So if storm damage, the fee's waived for that, right? I mean, when you get a notice, an after-the-fact permit, there's no fee, is
Yeah,
there?
I think what we're trying to say is something that's not somebody's choice. A tree that died or contracted a disease or fell over in a storm. Otherwise, they wouldn't be trying to take it out. Try not to penalize them any further for
Yeah,
it.
I guess that's what it's
Right.
saying.
So
Right.
they still have to maybe pull their weight in some sense. They still have to file the permit, whether or not they're still tied to
Yeah.
replanting requirements.
Well, if we're going to change the application to indicate that that's a no-fee application for storm damage,
Yeah.
then this seems the appropriate spot to
Yeah.
put something in there.
Yeah, I would add it storm damage, but I think the issue is going to be, what do you do about the disease? Yeah.
Is your experience you get more questions about the diseased trees than dead trees, or is it, can you really put it,
Well,
they use that as
so
a,
what do you guys consider dead? 75%
What do you consider dead?
75% dead, 50% dead, almost dead. To me, I just draw a line. There can't be anything green on that tree.
So you're dead.
Dead. Otherwise, it's a slippery slope. 50.
Right.
Like a tree that's 75% dead? It's not dead. Should it come out? Absolutely. But
Now, on one of my old properties, I have a tree about this big. And up, there's a knot up on one of the big branches up there that is just oozing, and it's just awful looking. And everybody that sees it swears that tree is dying and it needs to come out. And yet I've had arborists there, I've had Liz there, and it's just a particular quirk of the tree that stains and looks funny. I don't know if you remember that tree, but
it's a common thing.
but it's not diseased. And so if we didn't have it tested, people would swear and probably try to take it down just because they're afraid of it. but-
Yeah, or let's think of something like city mold, which comes from aphids, which are an insect. People freak out when they see the black all over their tree. That's easily treatable. You're talking like once or twice a year, somebody comes out, injects it, treats it, or whatever. So the diseased tree is not meant for diseases like a leaf spot,
Right, yeah,
meant for fatal.
I mean, I've had trees evaluated for disease in order to save them, in
Yeah.
order to know what kind of treatment to use.
Well, and there's some diseases that are like a Phytophthora root rot. You can treat for it and you can prolong it, but ultimately it's going to kill your tree.
And so would you be okay taking those out?
Phytophthora, yeah.
Because then maybe it should be, diseased tree beyond repair, or diseased tree that cannot be saved, or something like that.
Yeah, yeah. They can't be like mitigated. It's kind of like if people come in now and they want to get rid of a tree because branches are getting close to the house. If it can be mitigated by pruning the branch,
Right.
then we tell them they got to prune the branch. Or roots are getting too close to a patio. Well, then they can just prune the roots, put in a root barrier.
Right.
So it sounds to me that as you're the expert on trees, I mean, I would be fine to say it's based on the arborist, but as I'm listening to this conversation, it sounds like the laboratory testing helps you.
We could say,
Because if somebody appeals it, if someone says, oh, I don't agree with the arborist, then it just becomes the process of going through tree and shade, and
yeah.
so the laboratory diagnostic testing will help as a
That's where
third
I think
party.
some specificity in here is helpful.
Do you
Yeah.
want to add in something to the extent like, if I require it, so say it's something that's really obvious, like it's a
Yeah,
dog, like it's
okay.
a dogwood, and we know, or verticillium. I see the yellow streaking. It's obvious, right, or whatever it may be. Then that's fine. But if somebody's claiming, oh, this has a canker disease, so it's dying. Okay, well, you have to prove that to me, because I'm not saying it doesn't. It probably does, but which canker disease is it fatal? And only by getting like something like a ceridium, only by getting the name can we really then say, okay, ceridium canker, is it fatal to Leland cypress? So maybe that's a good way to do it. For the obvious ones, they don't have to go there, and for
So
the less
just,
obvious.
so the testing just if required.
Yeah,
And that's
by-
why I sort of said at the
by
beginning of this
numbers.
discussion, is it meant to be only in cases where you don't approve it? So that we're
talked
sort of
me-
gone.
You've talked me around.
Okay, all right, well, we'll fix something there and also add storm damage. Mary, before we go on to the next section, if I can just sort of have a logistical, it's 11 o'clock, so we have been through 200 lines in 2 hours, which means that to get to the end of this would probably be another hour. Do we want to do that? Do we want to say we're not going to get all the way through it and say where we'll stop, or do we just want to keep going?
My preference would be to keep going, see if we can finish this
Okay,
section.
well, we may be able
but-
to, but I'm just saying, I believe it will take till noon based on the time it has taken to get where we are. So that's fine. And there's some, and I'll be really upfront about, there are some things like this tree protection that I think need, some additional work, but not by us. So the next section is on the tree plan inspection, and just says the city arborist will schedule and conduct an inspection, and that's basically all that's in this part. There's a permission for the city to do the inspection in the previous section, but there is also this separate section just saying that that will be done. And I guess that's not redundant. I guess we're probably having both is fine. Right. Then, starting on line 490 is where you have tree protection during construction. I believe the current code has everything that you see there that's not in red line, that's starting with number 2. But the red line part, it was in the law oversight version and was an attempt to provide more protection, because I gather that despite some efforts, that trees are still dying during construction, but they can be protected. In fact, there are members of our tree committee that thought we ought to require hand digging in certain areas in order to protect. And this does not go that far. But it talks about, the problem I have with it is it talks about best practices. I just don't know if this section is a best practice. I feel like this is a section that needs expertise to really, because there are codes that have very, very rigid tree protection requirements. And this is kind of a tweener. It's better than what we have now. Is it enough? I don't know.
Well, having built a house recently, I'm very familiar with this, and I went above and beyond, I believe, what the minimum was by actually planting 4x4s in the ground and rigid posts and fencing around it and everything. But I picked a diameter outside the roots for some 100-year-old trees to protect based upon what I thought the maximum area I could protect. I even required hand digging of some of the foundations in certain areas. But everybody may not want to do that. The builder would not have done that if I hadn't been there, I don't think. Because they want to give themselves a clear pathway so that they can drive their forklifts between the trees and the house and everything. And I didn't afford that. So, to me, this is the most challenging to determine. Because, hey, we want people to try to protect trees as much as they can. And if somebody is willing to protect a tree that's within 3 feet of their foundation, how are they going to have protection on 360 degrees around it? So again, I'm having the most trouble with this, the way it's worded here.
Well, and I will say that part of the reason for, you mean because it's not enough? Or,
I'm not sure it's realistic what it's asking people to do.
Okay, well, that's where I was going to go. I'm not sure it's asking people in terms of homeowners, because I think despite people's best efforts and despite the desire maybe of the homeowner, that problems happen in construction. So this is a requirement for the contractor, not the homeowner. If anything, it protects the homeowner from losing something they may not want to lose.
I don't know that there needs to be any differentiation between the property owner and the.
No, but
and
I'm
the
just saying,
buil-
no, yeah, I
builder.
understand that, but just in practicality, I think this affects more the contractor and than it does, I mean, it protects the homeowner from the contractor cutting corners. And there was one, I know there was one member of the Law Oversight Committee that wanted a requirement that all materials be stored off the property, like in the street, you know, and I guess that didn't get in there because people didn't think that was, we could require
Oh, well,
that.
she was one of those dissenting views.
Yes, correct.
So just out of curiosity, what would the enforcement of this be?
Well, I think there was down in number 526, I believe this was added, and yeah, it was in the law oversight version, the line 526, failure of the property owners to comply with the requirements is cause for a stop work order.
I know what it says.
Yeah.
What I'm asking is how would we practically go about ensuring that's being done? That would be up to someone in building and licensing to be
enforcement, I get, right?
monitoring?
Yeah.
And
Code
is that,
enforcement doesn't do it now. Honestly, I think it would be the same as what it is now. Your tree protection fence is falling down. Reinstall it. Written
Right.
notice. Happens again, you can do a stop work.
And you do that now, you're saying?
Yes.
Okay.
It's pretty low in terms of my priority list, honestly, in terms of what I spend time on. But yes, that's what we do now if we go out to a site. But it's important we document it, because if we are going to put a stop work, we have to be consistent that we warned them once.
You're already doing that, okay.
so maybe I should rephrase my question. Is it realistic that we can enforce this and make it stick?
I mean, I don't. I
Maybe
mean, what is this actually requiring? Are they supposed to submit like a signed contract or an outside arborist report that they're going to do root pruning, air spading, they're going to have it watered, they're going to have soil tests? I don't know. I don't know what.
Well,
this,
it's calling for a plan. The protection plan is part of the. Well, it says here we're building is part of the overall plan. I guess it's part of the goes with the tree plan, the tree protection plan. It's a separate plan.
Okay, so I put that plan together, or have my people, whoever are doing this, put it together. What I'm asking is, how would we know all of it is being done in a practical day-to-day situation?
Good question.
I'm still not even sure what such a plan would look like, honestly. I mean, we had an earlier discussion on the fertilization and that type
Yep.
of stuff. Like, I've seen plans like that. I mean, at one point, I think it was with law oversight, we talked about an arborist report if there was, I forget how we defined it, but basically a really big tree on the property that needed to be protected. So not your 12-inch oak, but like a 30-inch loblolly or a 30-inch oak. We would have to actually have an outside arborist report on what they needed to do to preserve that tree during construction, whether it was root pruning, soil test, whatever, dead limb pruning, whatever it may be. And we would have to have that report and essentially a signed contract saying the homeowner was going to do this. They paid the tree, like they agreed to pay the tree company to do this. That obviously got transferred into this kind of middle ground, what is appearing here. I don't, like I said, I'm not sure what this would even look like.
Well, I'm absolutely a tree hugger, but I also think that this has to be realistic.
Yeah. Well,
For the reasons I stated earlier. You know, you've got a minimum 6 foot wide. I don't know what 6 foot wide is. I mean, a 6 foot diameter out from the center of the tree, 6 foot radius out from the center of the tree. So that would need to be clarified. But again, I'm looking at what's realistic and what are realistic expectations to come out of this. by example. I walk around town all the time, and I see tons of construction site and different things. You've got tree barriers around it. The tree barriers get driven over. They get, because they've just got little metal floppy posts on there, and they got the orange construction fencing, and the forklifts knock it down, or they need to orient the forklift in a certain direction and back into it, or they take it out, or they take out the fencing because their trenching requires them to attach to the sewer, which is right in that vicinity. So here they are trenching. They've done all this protection, and then they've trenched a linear line and taken out all the roots in that linear line or something. So, I mean, I think we need to have something strong, but there's got to be, we've got to be realistic also about what happened. The tree may end up dying, after all the efforts that we do. I mean, I look at trees that people are trying to save next to foundations, well, you've got your foundation, and if you look at the hole that they've dug into the ground, especially if they have a basement and are going deep, you've got them digging at least three foot minimum outside that foundation so that they can build the metal forms and pour in place concrete and everything. So right there, that would be disturbing anything 3 feet or more outside of your foundation. So I'm all for it, but I don't know the right wording. And to say such measures of tree root protection areas shall include grading, drainage changes, trenching, use of heavy equipment, access drives, things like that. I think some of those can be resolved, but not all of them. So this is a challenging one for
And
me.
the current code basically just requires the barriers,
Yeah, well, think in reality with the barriers, there's a lot of places where they require the tree protection fencing in whichever form, sometimes like an armored. You can't go within that fencing to do anything, not to trench, not to grade, nothing.
Right.
Here it serves, I learned pretty quickly that it doesn't really do any of that. It serves as a reminder for people not to run into them and not to take them down without a permit. And
Right.
to that extent,
But they do sometimes run into them.
the orange means stop, right? Don't touch.
Yeah.
So it does have a purpose, even if it's just a foot out from the trunk, right? Because we're dealing with small lots. And like the mayor said, if you think about it, with a 6 foot setback on one side, and then the other side is, say, 10 with parking halfway down the lot, you don't have any trees on the side that are living, essentially.
Yeah.
And then we have the front porch that can encroach, and then we have these fake basements, I call them, that are 6.5 feet tall, that require that extra excavation, so extra land disturbance. Really, the only trees that stay is if they're perfectly in the front yard, just kind of in the center or off to the non-driveway side, or if they're way in the back. Because then don't forget, you have pools being built right up to that 15-foot line, which then requires extra excavation into that 15-foot.
Into the setback, right.
Yeah. So
I'm just thinking of a scenario here where, say, we offered a minimum radius that has to be protected around a tree. At my house, I ended up going out probably on one tree 15 feet out to protect it. And so when they removed some of the fence to put in a sewer line there, they really didn't, in my mind, violate what a minimum might have been for the city. They violated my personal rule, which was to make it as expansive as I could. But I also recognized that I made it very challenging for them. And so to take it down, do their thing, and put it back again, wasn't necessarily acceptable, but it was reality. That's how it had to happen. So, if we try to establish a minimum, and I don't know, are minimums based on tree size or, to have I had a pine tree in the back that's only, say, 4 inches in diameter. So to measure from that out a 4-foot radius is one thing. To measure a 4-foot radius out from a 100-year-old oak only puts that fencing at about a foot outside the bark.
Yeah.
So there are different scenarios there. So I don't know whether this is one we need to give more thought to, Commissioner
I mean,
Gay, and
either
come
that or
back
we
to.
just go back to what, are you comfortable with what's in the current code?
I think, I know we have our goals for this code in terms of like simplicity and stuff like that.
And this
but
is one area that's more complicated.
I think if I think our focus should be more on protection than we have all these planting requirements. To have this be just kind of like sad and 20 years outdated does a disservice to the rest.
Okay,
What's the point of
yeah.
the rest of it if we're
Right.
not protecting something that's 100 years old?
Right.
How feasible are those protections, like the mayor said? I'm not under the impression that the orange fencing, if you install it and turn around, it falls down. It's not always, I mean, the contractors
I've
do
seen
move
those.
it.
Yeah.
But I'm not under the false illusion that it actually protects the roots. It doesn't, how we're doing it. Okay? It like you said,
I've heard
but it ends up 6 inches out from the base of a tree, or it ends up wrapped around, wrapped around the trunk of a tree. Because they have 2 trees in the front yards, that means they have about 10 feet in the center to get all their equipment in, right? I mean, but, and that's why originally we were talking about this, I had put in the extra requirements just for the the extra special trees. Because anything we do here does represent a higher cost to whoever's building their house.
Yeah.
So if we're requiring root pruning, air spading, hand digging, I'd be happy if the builders stopped using excavators to rip up things. That's what does the most damage. I mean, it does all represent a higher cost. Now, with home costs being close to $1 million, and this being a couple thousand, I mean, maybe we consider that reasonable. I don't know.
Well, pause a minute. Let's explain air spading, if anybody doesn't know what it is. It is basically using air to blow away the soil, so versus the mechanical digging. So if you will, as you're air spading, it's blowing the soil away from that root. So your root is left intact. So let's say you're trenching for a linear trench for a sewer. And you do that. Now you end up trenching and end up with the same end product, but you've got the roots being exposed and going in and out of your area perhaps. So that gives you the opportunity to place your pipes under the roots or above the roots or around the roots or whatever. But there is significant additional cost to do so.
When I
And so how far, again, do you want to go? Do we want to go in that kind of thing?
Well, most places, and remember my experience in doing these like municipal type and residential jobs for municipal requirements is 6 to 10 years old now, okay? But most places would go so far as to require root pruning, but say with a walk-behind trencher, which is kind of like a giant chainsaw. So we would say do the perimeter of the site with the walk-behind trencher, which maybe, I don't know, you could do 1,000 feet a day. It just cuts right through it.
Other codes do have this?
Oh, I did jobs like that when I was over in Montgomery County for the county and their requirements. And then we would go back with hand pruners, hand saws, chainsaws, and cut the roots cleanly, because that's the most important thing. If you're cutting roots, you're cutting roots. You just shouldn't rip them. That's the big
Cutting is
difference.
okay though, right?
I mean, cutting a branch affects a tree, but if you can cut them cleanly, that's the best you can do.
Right.
Recognizing, yes, we're putting in a house, so you've got to cut the roots.
But the tree can survive with cut roots, because I've had some people express concern about that.
Yeah.
But they can't.
Well, there's different calculations and stuff like that from different arborists and famous and things that I use for especially like sidewalk and curb repairs. But they say you really shouldn't cut inside the drip zone. Well, that's impossible here. So when we do sidewalk repairs, their threshold typically is root cutting within 3 times the trunk size. So if it's a 10-inch tree within 30 inches, that's when you start to need to think about removing the tree. And generally, if it's less than 1.5, the tree pretty much has to come out for safety. That's on one side. But, I mean, there's species and all the general health requirements that go along with that.
Let's pause a minute. Let me just read through abbreviated tree protection during construction, the current code, 253-32. City may designate in special circumstances a protected area on the site that shall be subject to the following provisions. Again, I have a little trouble with the city dictating where the protected areas are, but, and I'm not going to read them all, but A has to do with the storage of solvents and
And that's
things
still
that
in here.
could leach into the ground before development, et cetera. The developer shall be required to erect suitable protective barriers, including tree fences, tree protection signs, erosion barriers, through completion of site work. C says materials for active tree protection shall consist of chain link, orange laminated plastic, wooden post and rail fencing or other equivalent restraining material. Each tree that's required to be protected shall be shall be marked at the base of the tree trunk with blue colored water-based paint. Materials for passive tree protection shall consist of orange construction fencing. All tree protection devices shall remain in functioning condition. Essentially, it's just a flimsy orange construction fencing that is required now, in essence.
Yeah. And then it's got a provision that if the tree is damaged, it has to be replaced through the mitigation process, right?
Repaired or replaced with double, I think, if it's a specimen.
Liz, just curious, in the past 5 or more years that you've been here, has this orange fencing protection saved trees?
I think it draws attention to them so that Joe Schmo with a chainsaw, if it's in his way, he doesn't just go in and cut it out every time. He thinks twice about it, or she. I'm not, like I said, I'm not under any illusion that it's preventing any root damage. It's not. But I do think it keeps, because remember, when you have just job sites, you have a lot of subcontractors on there. A good general contractor will have their site manager there, but that's just not always the case. So then the people come in to put in the propane tank, there's a tree in the way, and they just chop it out.
Sure.
Okay? Because it doesn't have the orange fence on it. It's getting cut down probably. Because
Is that actually happening?
that's an exact example that just happened. They had to move their propane tank because it was too close to the building after they were done with everything. So final inspection, propane tank is 7 feet from your house, has to be 10 if that's the right number. Okay, you got to move the propane tank, but the landscaping and everything's already done. Propane company comes in, GC's already cleared out. Oh, dogwood, shoot, in the way. It happens.
Talk to me a minute about this tree protection program. If I recall, is this a true scenario that house goes for a permit to tear down a house? And they have to do tree protection. So before they tear the house down, they go out there and they put tree protection up all around all the trees. They tear down the house, and then they get a permit to construct a new house, and they start digging the foundations and all that. And at some point, they take out the trees that they had already protected.
So you're pretty close to the process. So it starts and they submit for demolition. And then we go out, we verify the survey is accurate. I record, the trees are usually listed, but usually they're just dots. So I'll record the species, size, and condition. And then when they are getting ready to demo, they give us a 24-hour notice. So the day before, they're ready to knock the house down. We go out, we verify the water and sewer have been disconnected, the electric's been disconnected, and the tree fence and the silt fence are up. Construction insurance is in, all that stuff. Sign, they have the erosion sign now too. Then after they're done the demo, they let us know. We go out and verify that nothing was destroyed, city property, neighbor's property, trees, whatever it may be. If everything is okay, they get their demo bond released back to them. Then they can apply to build the house. So during demo, to pick up the permit, they have to sign a little like 3-sentence thing the demo contractor does, saying all trees must be protected during construction. So it doesn't matter if this tree is going to be in the middle of your new house, supposedly, because plans change. Lots sell. You don't really know. So everything has to be protected during demolition unless it's dead already and they apply for a permit. So then when they come in to build the house, that's when they have the real tree plan that shows the proposed house, pool, driveway plopped down on a site plan that shows the existing trees. So that's what we use to then go through and review the plans, so the tree plan with the new house. And at that time, they should have their tree permit submitted, so we kind of do all that concurrently. And if there are changes, like the outdoor shower on the oak or the front walkway on the pine, we request those at that time.
So potentially there could be trees that impede the demolition process because they've got to go around them or whatever. And then after the demolition, they start building and then they take down those
Come out
trees.
anyway.
It
Yeah.
just,
Yeah.
I wasn't sure of the rationale. Is it to try to convince them to save as many trees as they can? Is that,
Well, everything has to stay during demolition because we don't know what they're gonna build. We've had lots that have been demoed 3 years ago and we still don't have a house plan for them. So to approve something on a theoretical house plan that we haven't even seen, what sense does that make where we have no review period at that point for the trees? We might as well eliminate that whole section. So, I mean, I actually think it works out okay. Now, if we were reviewing and approving the new house and the demo at the same time, then we could do what you say. But
That
as
doesn't
long,
happen much, or what?
no.
Really?
Not the way it,
No, you can't
Yeah.
issue a,
But
think
yeah,
about it.
yeah,
If you issue a tree or a new house permit and a demo permit, we've had lawsuits over similar things if we can think back many years. And then you end up with 2 buildings on one lot. So that's the current practice. If we issued them at the same time, it would be different for the trees, but.
Right, but I guess, am I hearing you saying that you'd have to protect in a major way beyond just the fencing, those trees that might ultimately come out? Is that part of your concern here, that we would be requiring?
no,
that?
I just threw that in there so that there was some clarity in that process about protecting those trees during demolition.
We don't really, when I first started, it might have been a little different, but recently, not many trees get removed accidentally on purpose during demo, because we only have a few demo contractors, and they know. All it takes is the penalty one time where the homeowner is mad at them or the general contractor is mad. I mean, we got like, 5 demo contractors total. So they learn, and that's not a precise, I mean, it's literally knocking stuff down, right? So it's not a super precise job, but I think they caught on pretty quickly. I think now it's more foundation and subcontractors that lose more trees during construction accidentally on purpose is what I'll call it. Especially digging the foundation. That's probably the main problem.
Yeah. And so, what's the fix?
Well, I'm not sure we'll fix it today. Maybe the appropriate thing is for you and Liz and maybe myself or whoever to get together and put some thoughts down. This doesn't quite do it for me right now, and
Because it's not enough, or it's too much, or it's just confusing?
That's what I was going to ask.
What?
Do we want it stronger, less effective, eliminated?
It sounded like to me it's not realistic. So if the goal is it's got to be realistic, and if that language does not match,
I guess the point is, do we want to require above and beyond tree protection fencing?
And
Well-
you said you've worked with other codes that do just that, right?
Yeah.
And many codes do, and this was an attempt, I think, Oversight Committee's attempt to get more protection in there.
I'd say baseline is the orange fence. That's like your bare
Well,
minimum
absolutely,
for
and that's already in
protection.
there. I mean,
Yeah.
absolutely, that's
So
baseline.
do we want to like leave it like that and maybe just tighten it up a little around the orange fencing if we can? Or do we want to go above and beyond that?
Well, what I heard, Liz, about the orange fencing is that it is minimal at best. It may or may not do anything other than bring someone's attention to the fact that that tree is there. And it's relatively low on your priority list of things that you've got to follow up on.
Yes.
So what concerns me about the minimal approach we've got now is the realism of if we go to another level, which it appears we've got lots of people pushing, law oversight and others, to do something a bit more stringent, how are we going to make that realistic?
Well, it may be starting with something as easy as beefing up that orange construction fencing. You know, I don't think they're told how to put it up, so they usually get these little flimsy metal posts and hammer them in the ground and put the fencing there. Well, that orange fencing rips fairly easily if you
Yeah, it
lean
falls
against
over
it
easily,
or touch it. Not that I'm the best example, but in my yard, I put 4x4 posts in the ground around the perimeter, and then I put 2x4 horizontals. So it was absolutely rigid. You're not getting a vehicle through there, and you're not climbing through there easily. And then I put the orange fencing. So I think maybe a hybrid of something like that that's more substantial and more challenging, if you will, to remove and enter into that area or that zone. Because I thought it worked pretty well. It kept paint and stuff out or people from walking on it and compacting the roots within that area. So maybe that is a possibility.
Yeah, we can change the type of like our specifications for what we require for the fence. We can make it like a wire. We can make it, I've done jobs before where we literally put like 2x4s against the trunk and then had it flaring out. I mean, we can require any different materials we want for that.
And nothing's perfect. Putting 4x4s in the ground around the perimeter of the tree, what are you most likely or possibly gonna dig into? Tree roots.
Yeah, right.
So here, yeah, so there's the pluses and the minuses.
right.
So,
Okay,
Susan, why don't
so,
we
Okay,
move forward and we'll come back to that. And
okay.
Liz, maybe you
Yeah,
can
I
send.
knew that was gonna be one of
Yeah.
because it's new and it's.
So it sounds like we want something a little stronger but more enforceable.
Stronger than what we have now, but not as onerous and enforceable and.
Okay.
The next section is pretty much the same as what's in the code currently, but I have a question for Liz. It said, this is just some basic things under tree planting requirements, and it says prior to the issuance of a final development approval or certificate of occupancy, the tree planting shall be inspected by the city. Is that only for new construction, or is this related to any tree plan?
Where are you on?
I'm on line
534?
534.
Yeah, prior to this. That's a final inspection, new house or, yeah, because even with the renovation, they don't get a CO, right?
Right,
If you're doing
okay.
an addition or
Okay,
whatever.
so this is for,
We do have a final approval, right? Close
Right.
out the permit, complete, verify everything. So we wouldn't close it out unless they met their tree planting.
right. Okay, so then it just says, in the event there are any changes to the approved plan, the changes must be reviewed and approved by the city before final inspection. Okay. Then this one, the second one is another note, not a clause, because it's came up in one of our tree meetings where you thought there should be a requirement that trees come from the nursery and meet ANSI standards, and that they're balled and burlapped according to ISA standards.
I think that we have a bunch of stuff in the code now about how to plant
Yeah.
trees, and I think it's not that they have to come from a nursery, but I think we said, well, let's just do away with these multiple lines of
Yeah.
balled and burlap tree must have wire basket removed and blah,
Right.
blah, blah. And just say all trees must be planted according to like ANSI and ISA standards or something like that.
So you don't even need the balled and burlap part?
No, because they'll be able to, at 2 inches, you'll be able to get
Okay.
container plants.
Okay.
Yeah. So should it, well, no, it doesn't say all of them have to be balled and burlapped. It just says trees which are balled and burlapped must be planted according to ISA standards. So in other words, it's 2 standards. All trees must come from a nursery and meet ANSI standards from the nursery.
Yeah.
But then those that are balled and burlapped are planted according to ISA standards.
I would just do one line, all trees to be planted must meet applicable ANSI and ISA standards.
Okay.
And that way it covers all of it. Basically, like, we're looking, is the tree planted correctly, or is the root ball 2 feet out of the ground? I mean,
Okay, that's
I've
fine.
very rarely do I go to a planting, because most of these are done by professionals where it's horrible, and we would make them change it.
If you also want to add back in definitions, ISA is not in the
Oh,
definition.
okay, all right, okay. ANSI is though, right, but ISA is not. Okay, that's fine. Okay, if that's all for under tree planting, then now we get to the real meat, which is what to do about mitigation. The one issue that has plagued people for years is the mitigation process. And here is where it also talks about mitigation is not required for a protected tree removed because it interferes with the root or crown development of a larger, healthy, protected tree on the same lot. So did we say earlier we wanted that to come out?
Well, that's where I think I had a little problem with on the same lot. Just like I have a problem with how we treat line trees sometimes. You know, we can get some pretty darn big trees on neighboring lots that could very well interfere just as with other trees, just as they are on our own lot. And so I don't understand why we're treating them different.
Because we don't really have control.
You don't have control over the one on another lot.
So the other lot, they can knock everything down and build a new house. Then we have somebody that's completely exempted, no link to anything. We can't go back retroactively and say, hey, never mind, now you have to put your trees in. But in all practicality, sometimes the neighbors, 3 surrounding neighbors, back, side, and side, do have large overhanging trees.
This is basically saying it does not have to be mitigated if it is removed because it interferes with the root or crown development of a larger protected tree.
So I want to remove, I'm trying to think this through. I want to remove a smaller tree on my property that's nearish the property line because I believe it interferes with a much larger, healthy, protected tree on my neighbor's lot.
Well, and then here's the thing. I say it doesn't interfere. This tree is 10 inches and the neighbor's tree is 30. In the battle of wills, the 30-inch tree is going to win. So I don't know. That is just very, very strange.
I think this was added during the Planning Commission's version, and it was an attempt to get quality over quantity, but I think it's problematic too.
I guess my question would be, if anybody could point me to any permit I've gotten in 6 years that reflect this scenario, I'd be willing to reconsider, but I
think we
can't
marked
think
it
of
out
any.
of the other one, where it appeared earlier, didn't we? Wait a minute.
Okay, next.
Okay, all right, so then, replacement trees are of a species permitted under so they have to come from a permitted list, that's reasonable. And then, okay, so the replacement trees are now required to be a little smaller than in the current code. Instead of 12 feet tall and 3 inches, and that's gonna be caliper, it's 8 feet tall and 2 inches. And we talked about that at the last meeting, the value of doing it that way. There's more variety to select from at the nursery. It's easier for people to plant. They grow as fast as a 2-inch might grow as fast as a 3-inch, or will catch up at the same rate. So there are a lot of good advantages to doing that.
Cheaper.
And then they're
now
less
we've talked about
expensive.
raising fees. That significantly lowers the cost of replanting, going from 3 to 2.
Yeah,
And it allows the homeowner to do some work.
right.
Yep, it would be reasonable to assume like two people could go grab a 2-inch tree in a pot from a nursery and come and plant it at their house. They don't have to, but they could. Whereas with a B&B tree at 3 inches, those weigh several hundred pounds. You have to have specialized equipment. So,
Well, and the next one is where in the current code, it has the, you have to mitigate inch per inch, and it gets into ridiculous because you end up having to plant, 10 trees on a lot, and you can't possibly, so that's why there's fee in lieu of mitigation. This is an attempt to make that more realistic by saying for each protected tree removed, remember, it's only protected trees, that the replacements are determined by basically that, if you take out 36 inches or more, you have to put in 4, but nobody has to put in any more than 4. Nobody ever has to put in any more than 4, and most people would be having to put in fewer than that. And it's an attempt to make that more realistic and easier to comply with. That's the purpose of it anyway. Then I have a note over on the side that, and Liz, I think this came up because you had asked if the trees preserved or relocated on site. This is where we have a big hole because
What line is that?
it's the little note over on the side from 554. Let me see if I can explain this. Since the current requirement is based on inches, the code allows for the equivalent replacement caliper to take into account the trees preserved. But when you have a number tree replacement criteria, what do you do? How do you count the ones you've preserved? Is that your question, right? That was your question to me.
well, I think the thing I take issue with this is the tree for tree, and it's an unintended consequence, I think, is the properties with more trees currently usually don't have to plant anything if they take one down, right? So say you own a property, I'm thinking like it's a woods on Columbia or Henlopen, okay? Old cabin, 50 trees, okay? Well, now if you take one down, you don't have to plant anything because you got 49 trees left. So even if it was a big tree, it's mitigated against the other 1,000 inches of trees you have.
Because it's more than the minimum, or what?
Because you have more than the minimum density and you have mitigation, but you have so many other trees, it's mitigated.
Oh, I see, it's mitigated by
against
it,
them.
so you're still counting inch for inch, you're still counting the inches, but there's just so many inches left on the
Yeah,
property.
so the only
Okay,
way
got
they'd
it,
ever
got
have to
it.
plant is if for some reason they went to develop the lot,
Right,
right?
yeah.
So that's why we keep track of it. But now with this, the proposed, that person will have to replant trees in their woods. So it seems like it's kind of penalizing the properties with more, not penalizing, but putting more of an onus on them for replanting when they're already carrying way more than their minimum density of trees. Now, where it plays out, where most of the time you see the high mitigation now and the high tree replacement is new construction. So our new construction, if I say, I think the numbers for 2021 is we had 110 tree permit applications, not issued, but 110 applications in like 44 new construction. There's about 1 permit per new construction, so you can do the math there. We're close to like 50% of tree permits are related to new construction. That's much higher than I thought it was gonna be, honestly. I thought it would be around a quarter. Those are the ones that are gonna get off a little bit easier, right? Because they can take out 10 trees, 12 trees, large trees.
And they only have to put in 4.
Yes. And I know that wasn't our intent when we were going all through this tree for tree and everything, but that really seems to be how it shakes out. Is that the people now who don't have to replant are the people that take out 3 and only have to put in 1, which would be a pretty common thing. You have 3 trees on your property that are dead or dying, and you got to take them out and you only have to replant 1. Now they have to replant more. So I think that's the main issue that we came across with this. And it's not really what I thought is only when I started running the math
right.
that came out this way.
Right. But isn't the core of the problem that you're using 2 different metrics? That in one metric, you're using the total inches, so therefore what's there counts. And in this other metric, you're using number of trees. Isn't that what causes the issue? I mean, in other words, what's the fix?
mitigation
You know,
instead
but I
of
mean,
tree
what-
for tree. That's it's like they're just two separate concepts, and I guess that's what happens. I don't know unless
What I'm saying, but what's the fix? So for every tree removed, so who has to replace and who doesn't? And how many do they have to replace?
I don't know if there is a fix. This is tree for tree. This is how it is. This is how it shakes out in the end if you change from mitigation to tree for tree. Maybe there's some sort of caveat you can put in there that lessens the
Well, I'm actually
Planting for
troubled by the
existing-
fact that the homeowner who has a lot of trees is gonna have to plant more, and the contractor gets off with only planting 4 little trees in a new lot. I don't like that.
feel like it's the opposite of what we
Exactly.
was
No, it's
intended.
exactly true. That's exactly right.
And that the person with a more treed lot, whether it's wooded or they just happen to have more trees, not to say they should be exempt completely, right? But if they already
They
have a
would be
bunch of
now. They would be
they're,
now.
they're already carrying more than their fair share. If
Right.
we're looking at trees as a community asset, right?
Mhm.
And that's why we've said everybody has to have 3 because it's the
Right.
benefit of the community.
Right.
This is how we live. It's how we breathe air, right?
Mhm.
Keeps our waterways clean, on and on and on, all the benefits. But it doesn't really seem right to have it work out that way, where the people with more than their fair share of trees, whether they like them or don't like them,
Mhm.
have to now incur a more costly burden because not only do they have to pay for the care of the existing trees, which is not cheap,
Mhm.
now they have to plant more trees and pay for the care of them.
Yeah, I mean, I am
It's troubling,
I'm
yeah.
struggling. And at the same time, I think we all acknowledge that the current system with having to,
Confusing.
well, it's not only confusing, but it's not realistic. You know, somebody can't plant 10 trees, or
It's just so rare that that happens. You guys hear the anecdotal stories. The everyday permits are not a problem. The stories that you hear that people reach out to commissioners are new construction for the most part, or really strange instances like where they have a super large tree that's dying and they have nothing else on the lot. Odds, like stuff like
There's
that.
been a lot of cases before Parks and Shade Tree where people say, I can't possibly plant 10 trees. I
Yeah,
need
and
to
look
do
at what they are. They're all new construction pretty much.
'Cause
If
the
you go
house
back.
has filled up the lot.
Well, but they still can't plant new 10 trees. even
Yeah,
if it's
but
new
that's why we
construction.
have park and shade. That's why we have a fee in lieu of mitigation. That's pretty, I mean, that's what
Okay, I see
DC
what
does.
you-
You
yeah,
either plant the trees, or you pay the money. It's just,
Right.
you have choice there. You can either pay or plant. But
Well, and
Isn't
this,
there-
this was, this was meant to try to get people to plant fewer so that you'd actually have trees in the ground rather than people paying money. I think that
Yeah.
was part of the plan here, is to make it realistic enough that people would want to replace those trees rather than paying money.
well, and this is where I kind of think of what the mayor says about line trees. So if in between every property along the front street, there was one nice tree, an oak, a maple, a linden, we wouldn't need 3 trees per lot, right? We wouldn't need but that's just not reality. That's not how it is. And that's why we have this code.
Can I interject? Yeah, so I don't have a vote, but don't you think at some point you say, this person has enough caliper on their lot? So whatever that number is, so long as they have the number of trees and they hit whatever caliper it is, isn't it at that point you say, we'll never ask them to plant another tree under any scenario because they don't have the area on their lot to begin with, and they have whatever you set as your policy as once you have this amount of,
You're done.
yeah.
And isn't that what minimum density is? I mean, right now, how we do it, because if you really read the code, somebody can only get a fee in lieu of mitigation from the commission with the approval of the city arborist. To me, we have the minimum density, so that's the minimum they're required, and anything above and beyond should be able to request a fee in lieu. That's why we set that 3-tree minimum. So I've always given my approval by them coming to Park and Shade if they met the minimum density.
Don't you think even fee in lieu, at some point, you shouldn't even have to pay a fee in lieu? You've got so much on your lot, and something comes down, it just seems at some
But see,
point.
right now with the fee in lieu, you would only have to pay it if you didn't have a lot left on your lot. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because
right,
it's
right,
in relation to
right.
the mitigation.
So then so it's just a matter, so in this scenario, it would be a matter of coming up with the number of caliper inches on the lot where you don't have to plant anymore.
Sort of would be a credit, if you will.
Yeah,
if
well,
you
then
have-
that's what the
Right.
note says there, what kind of
And
credit.
then will we be okay with everybody clearing their lots down to, we say the least we're willing to accept is 75 inches?
Well, actually, I was gonna say, that since if the protected tree definition is 8 and 3 is the minimum, is the number 24.
So will be okay with lots just having 3 8-inch trees?
Or should we require new construction to have more trees? I mean, there's just, again, anecdotally, there's a house next to me that pretty much clear cut, and there's 2 big trees and that's it, and it looks like heck. So, you know, I almost think we should have required them to plant more.
Don't they need to plant one more if they've only got 2?
They planted a scraggly little thing, but I see where we're going here, where we've got these properties that are dense and they're doing their part. But I think one of the concerns is there's lots of new construction we've all seen where it seems like it's kind of catch as catch can.
So a different-
Whether that's true or not, it's just, that's the perception, at least my thought.
So set a different standard for new construction.
First blush, I
then
think
we
it
would
ought to
have
be a standard for everybody. Set that minimum density, and
Yeah.
everybody has to adhere to it. Now, where you get into some trouble is, should the minimum density on a 100 by 100 lot be equal to that of a
It's not.
50 by 100 lot? Should that be
Formula.
equal to a 50 by 84 lot?
Yeah, it's divided by 1,666. and
What's
point-
happening?
Say that again, Liz?
It's 3 per 5,000, so the math
Okay.
goes
yeah,
up from
right.
there.
That's right.
But if you're taking down a 1,200-foot bungalow or something and you're building a 3,000 square foot house, right? I mean, that's what's happening, right?
In some instances.
Almost all is.
Well, no one's building smaller,
Yeah,
right? So, and we're losing more
Sometimes
trees,
the
right?
you'd be surprised, sometimes the coverage, a lot of the older homes are non-compliant with their setbacks and coverages. You'd be surprised. But
Do
just
you have a recommendation on
just-
new construction?
just construction, period, loses trees.
Oh, yeah, no. yeah,
Even
yeah,
if
we
you took
talked about
down
that.
a house and put in a new
Right.
one, just like we were talking about over digs and setbacks and stuff like that, you lose trees during that. It's just inevitable.
But interestingly, your scenario, Commissioner, is that a small cottage that has more ground space
Right.
and the new construction has less ground space, I'm hearing that we should require greater density of trees on
I
the
don't
new construction lot.
I don't think so. I think we should beef up the protection. I don't think we should hold them to a different standard, because then going forward, at what point does it become not new construction and then they can revert back to the 3 trees? Right? Because they can take them out until they reach 8 inches. So that gets hard to figure out.
But if you put just a minimum number of inches on the site so that there's a credit for people taking out trees, then you're saying that basically incentivizes people to take out everything.
Well, they still
Down to
have
that
to
credit.
meet those conditions.
Yeah.
But I think the inches should be a lot higher than 24. I think it
Oh,
should
that's
be
what you're
like
saying, okay.
90, like 3 30-inch trees, something like that, or 75. I don't think it should be just 3 small trees. It should be a higher number to account either for having large trees on the site or for having multiple trees.
In Sussex County, Liz, is there a town that has a stricter ordinance than we do, or one that you think works better?
In
Or
Delaware, no,
Yeah.
we're the example.
We
Like
are.
the urban forester, we were one of the field trips for the regional state arborist association to go, like I, participate in DENREC webinars about how great our tree code is. So we are the example, us, and I think, I want to say like Newark or somebody upstate has one too.
I just didn't know if there's something in the area where there was another town that has similar issues where we could get some of that language, maybe would it be helpful? But
No, I mean, there's plenty over in like the DC area though. They all have their own little thing. Like when I was in Rockville, they didn't do anything with residential, but they did commercial. They regulated. Everybody's little Montgomery County has its own rules that are pretty intense.
This is why I wanted code review of the entire code.
Right.
Because
We
they
have-
would know, what's done and, they would know the Atlanta tree code, they would know the Charlotte tree code, which is, I think, another strong one.
Yeah.
And be able to say what's realistic here based on our size lots.
Well, not just the size lots, but like it's unique
and our
here, right?
goals.
We have
And our
very
goals,
high,
yeah.
very high rental and visitor rate, and trees do not add to rental value. I'll be honest.
They don't?
To rental for a weekly rental? No.
Well, I mean, there
pool
have been,
does.
there have been
Parking
studies, when
does.
we did our green infrastructure presentation, there was a study that showed that they increased the people linger longer in front of businesses with trees, I
Oh,
think
for
the study
sure.
showed.
Yeah,
Yeah,
like
but
a
you-
nicely
okay.
treed downtown with a little
Yeah.
bit of shade.
Right.
People adore our downtown. Anybody that comes to visit me thinks it's like the cutest that, like, especially for it being a mile long on Rehoboth Avenue.
Right.
Everybody loves it. I'm talking residential properties.
Okay, I see what you, okay, so you're
If
saying
the
it doesn't increase the
residential
value of the
rental had its way, the whole thing would be house, pool, parking, patio.
Okay.
That's what generate. You have a pool, okay? That's 2,000 more a week for rental income,
Right,
right?
yeah,
That's
right.
just it's just dollars and cents. Now doing a development, that beautiful front yard tree adds value to a house for sale. Yes,
Right, okay. yeah,
generally,
Right, okay.
but not in the rental world.
Commissioner
That's
Gay,
what
what
we
do
do.
you, what do you think about moving on? And
I think we
we've
should.
still
I mean,
got to come back.
This is the one thing we have to solve, and yet it's
Well,
never.
we've still got to come back to tree protection requirements.
Yeah,
We've
yeah,
got
that's true. Yeah.
we're going to
Yeah.
come back to replacement and mitigation formulas.
But we kind of saw a little
Yeah,
bit
listen-
made a
Yeah.
solution with putting a minimum caliber inch per lot to address the wooded.
Yeah, it's just that you think it should be 75. I mean.
It should be high, yeah.
Okay, and I think Mr. Diefendorfer has a statement. Yeah, yes.
Mr. Diefendorfer has.
First off, I want to say you guys have done a fabulous job with this. I mean, it's incredible how difficult this is.
Oh,
You've done a great
really
job.
is.
You guys have all done great. I like trees too. So again, since my tree has come up, several times today, I just want to bring it up one more time. Add one more thing.
I want to remind everybody to go by 113
exactly.
Newcastle.
Right, the dog will bark at you. So, okay. I have a tree. It's dying in the front of the in the lot. We've done everything possible to keep it alive. We've spent thousands of dollars trimming it, fertilizing it, et cetera. My grandfather planted it during World War II. All right, so this tree is over 80 years old. So the problem is, and you guys have done great. Before this was the ordinance was changed, we would have had to plant 7 trees. So now I only have to plant 3. Fabulous. That's better. But the problem is, and I've heard Liz, I've listened to this several times, and I've listened to these conversations. Liz has said that all trees have a lifetime, right? Trees are going to die eventually. And then I've also heard her say that it's very difficult to plant a new tree right where a big, large tree was, because you've got roots, you've got the water pipelines, et cetera. So I'd like you to just think about this, and there's been a lot of other things talked about. So I'm being penalized because I have a 24-inch tree that has reached the end of its life. Trees don't live forever, right? So for me to have to plant 3 trees, I think is a tad unreasonable. So just because I have a large tree and it reached the end of its life, it's going to die eventually. I would suggest it would be fair for me to plant 1 tree to replace that. So those other trees are going to grow eventually to be the size of that one. But to put 3, now 3 is way better than 7, but I don't want to have a forest on my land, on my 50 by 100 foot lot, because my tree that the grandfather planted 80 years ago died. So that's the only thing I would ask you to think about, that maybe in a situation like that where it's dead and that you could have some type of mitigation. Okay, it's a 1-for-1. So thank you.
And are you saying the new tree you would probably put in a different location because it would be hard to plant, or
Yeah,
do you have another location for one?
I can't. I can find another location.
Okay.
But I can't put it where it is now.
Right,
Because,
okay.
And then that takes out a huge section of the front yard.
yeah.
And the other side has another tree that I've planted.
Right.
With when we renovate it. Plus
Right.
it has my flagpole, so that can't be moved. So, so the front yard's out. So I have to now then come along the sides, or in between the neighbors or whatever. So I mean, could I make it work? Yes, but I mean, is it fair because they had this old large tree that has
Right.
died? I don't think it's fair.
Yeah,
So,
no, okay.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you. Well, for me, that merits conversation about mitigation. And if you take out, say, an oak tree, and you put back in an oak tree, couldn't that be sufficient? Because in 80 years, that oak tree is going to be the same size as what you have there now.
Will it?
Maybe.
We don't really. Odds are no, it won't live that long or grow that large.
Because
Because what percentage of trees really live to be 100 years old and get to be, gosh, what's their tree, 30, 40 inches in like diameter? It's just unlikely. But I think what we're going back to again now is different standards for new construction, removing trees of their own volition. Kind of like where I said earlier about fees, we don't want to penalize people removing trees that aren't their choice. When they remove that tree, it's not really their choice. There's literally no other option.
Right, I get it. Yeah, yeah,
Right.
I know, that's, yeah.
And I think that's what we haven't really resolved.
Right.
Is like essentially a motive behind it. And I don't know if that can be addressed in a code necessarily.
Well, I mean, that may be a good segue to this last section. And actually, I'm going to say that if we still have an unresolved issue, a big one, about mitigation, then I will argue that we also should set aside fee in lieu of mitigation for a separate discussion, because those things are intricately linked. And, you know, I will, so let me just make two comments about that. First of all, the fee that's in here it goes up to $1,200 for each replacement tree. And part of that was what Liz said about the actual cost of the city getting a tree to plant in lieu of mitigation and to care for it for a couple of years. That's actually a realistic cost. So that's one thing, that the fee may go way up. That's proposed. And the other thing was that one of the goals for this, and I think it's probably hard to do in an ordinance form, so I don't know if this is going to be the place for it, but we've talked about incentives. What can you do to incentivize people to, to plant, more trees or to save trees or whatever? And that's why there's a highlighted area here at line 588 that says tree protection is a justification for a variance. In other words, so could somebody get an area variance or a setback variance in order to save a tree? So I think perhaps we should pick up there next time while we're also trying to solve the whole mitigation in terms of number of trees, number of caliber, and all that, with the fees and the incentives that go with it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
See there, Tree.
I think that's it, right?
You have a White House with red shutters?
Old picture, old picture.
Okay. But
Okay.
Yeah.
we see the tree there. Any further comments from the commissioners?
How long before Mr. Diefendorfer will be able to plant a tree in that area? How many years does it take to come back to where you can actually use that area?
Depends on what kind of tree it is and how good a job they do grinding like the stump and roots. Like typically it's not
That's not an
recommended.
answer.
Because I can't give you an answer.
How long?
You could
will
throw
it
a tree
take
in-
It has to come back sometime.
You could throw a tree in there the day you grind that stuff out.
In the same spot?
Sure.
But
Would that be the first place I'd want to plant a tree? No. Because if they don't do a great job, or
Yeah,
if you have a lot of roots that are missed,
Yep.
big structural
Right.
roots,
I've
which
heard
most of
that.
them are in the top 1.5 foot of the soil, so they should be able to get them, but say they don't, then has anybody ever been out to tree removal a couple years after and they didn't do a good job and you have all these sunken areas of the lawn? Now you're having to go back and backfill areas or whatever it may be. So you can, it just generally isn't recommended as your like top spot to replant.
he's losing a valuable area.
Yeah, but remember, we also have a year. So between when the permit is issued and we do that tree inspection, there's a year in there.
So you gave a date. What if we made him sign a library book takeout and say, I will bring this tree back in 2 years? Of course, that's hard to enforce.
Well,
It's too bad
the
that we're
problem.
losing a good area.
It's a problem we have now, yeah. Well, think of it this way. By the time they have to take out the next tree, if they have to replace that, it might be able to go back in the other area.
Are there any further comments by the commissioners?
I just
Commissioner
want to,
Sharp?
make sure that I'm trying to think all this out correctly, and I'm asking for y'all to set me straight if I'm not fundamentally thinking about this properly. It feels like to me, from things that I've read and presentations I've attended, and Liz, I'm going back to some statistics in my head, that I think at one time, or even recently, I read something where it talked about there were 800 and something tree removals on private property, which is what we're talking about now, and we only put back in somewhere around 350, 380 trees, something like that.
I know what you're talking about. They were older statistics from our different
Right.
permitting system.
Right. Yeah.
But
But-
we're about the same.
But the theme of it is, if you take down 3, we're putting 1 back in.
Not we.
No, we, the
city's doing a good job.
community, we on private property. For
Yes.
every 3 we take down, we're putting 1 in.
And we have to keep in mind that the majority of our urban forests, which is all of the trees in the city of Rehoboth, lie on private property.
Right.
And that's not unique to here. That's throughout the U.S.
So the only thing I wanted to keep in mind as I think about all of the hundreds of lines that we've got in here is exactly how much more, because I don't think it's going to help to put an additional tree back in. If you take 3 down, you put 2 in. I think we're going the other way, or what it feels like is we're going the other way. And I just want to kind of level set that if the goal here is to, and maybe as we pick up our next meeting, maybe it is a moment to kind of come to really clear terms of what is happening to us here from a broad perspective on private property. And I'm not saying it's good or bad. I'm just saying it is happening to us.
Right.
It does not appear we will be able to stop it.
Correct?
I just think that's a pipe dream now.
Right.
And the horse is already out of the barn some time ago. So I don't mean to be fatalistic, but I want to think about, as we're looking at all of these other nuances and tweaks and so forth, what are we really doing to the mission?
Well, I actually think, and I was going to suggest this had we gotten all the way through it. I realize we've gotten through it with some holes still to solve, but this might still be a useful next exercise. Mayor, I saw you have that comparison chart that Liz did. And I'd like you maybe to present that at our next meeting, because that really shows the ordinance in practice. It shows, for her analysis is the various permits in various categories that she's gotten in applications, how they would be viewed under the current code, how they would be viewed under the new code. So we can see what the impact of the new code is on applications. That's the first part. And the second part is to review what the CDP, the new CDP that's going to be adopted this year, says about our tree priorities in the city, and use that as a guide to finishing the sections that we still have questions about.
I wonder how many really valuable canopy trees we could plant if we undergrounded our power lines. Because that would open up a lot of space.
Not really. I mean, because if we were talking in the right of way, we still have limited root space. That's your problem. And the front yard canopy trees, they don't get super damaged from the utility pruning, because they were pretty aggressive this last go around, and it was mainly trees on city property. So I don't think that would really significantly change our urban forest.
All you have to do
Certainly
is
hasn't
drive
helped
down the
Country Club.
street.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing, like, we only have, 2-foot right-of-ways in Country Club? We're not
Well,
planting,
no, some of them are, Munson's a little bit.
we're not planting canopy trees in 2.5 feet, 3 feet, the majority of our right-of-ways. Now, some cities, like, I can think of DC, they own sometimes up to 10 feet behind the sidewalk.
Right.
So a lot of those a lot of those front yard trees you see,
We're not, they're the cities.
they're city trees. Because it has all that root space, but
Commissioners on this side, anything further before I go to the public one last time? No? Very good. Let's go to the members of the public. One more chance to say something? Nope. Stephanie,
Thank you for
you're fine.
sticking
Thank you for being here and
hanging in there.
participating. Thank you, Liz. We appreciate your time. Couldn't have done it without you, actually. And Commissioner Gay, thank you for leading the charge here. Again, to the commissioners, Commissioner Gay is your contact if you have any questions or something. Our next meetings are on trees are April 12th and April 26th. 9 o'clock, there are special meetings on Tuesdays. With that, I don't know where the gavel is, we will adjourn at 12:13 p.m. Thank you very much.
Thank you.